Hey there, night traveler. You've wandered far from the bustling hum of daylight, slipping quietly into this soft, shadowed space where history whispers its most intimate secrets. Tonight, we're going to talk about something both ancient and universal, a topic that's been with us since the first flicker of firelight, yet is often wrapped in layers of mystery, awkward silence, or outright taboo. I'm talking about sex. Yes, that curious, messy, wild, and sometimes perilous dance humans have performed for millennia. Now, before you settle back into your pillows and imagine the romanticized scenes from movies or sappy novels, let me gently nudge you toward a different view. Ancient sex wasn't always the candlelit, slow dance kind of thing. In fact, it was often strange, dangerous, and wildly different from what you might expect. Imagine stone walls, cracked parchment scribbles, flickering torchlight casting long shadows over sweaty, hurried encounters. Think of odd rituals, strict taboos, or surprising freedoms. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was downright terrifying. You might picture ancient lovers as graceful figures in flowing robes, softly caressing one another beneath a tapestry of stars. But in truth, their stories are stitched with threads of power, survival, superstition, and even violence. The landscape of desire stretched in many directions, shaped by cultural belief systems that could make our modern heads spin. There were sacred spaces where sex was a divine act, and other corners of the world where intimacy was strictly controlled, punished, or commodified. So, as you lie here, wrapped in your blankets, let your imagination drift gently back through the millennia. Picture the flicker of oil lamps in a cramped chamber, the rough touch of linen or animal skin. Hear the soft, whispered prayers to gods who governed fertility and fate. Feel the tension between human longing and the rules that tried to cage it. And relax, because tonight there's no rush. We'll wander through these strange, ancient landscapes of intimacy at the speed of a slow, meandering river, exploring the odd, the sacred, and the sometimes downright bizarre ways our ancestors understood sex. Ready? Good. Rest your head, breathe deep, and let's begin this journey. Not with modern expectations, but with curious openness, stepping quietly into the shadows where ancient passions hid. You step inside a quiet, sun-warmed courtyard somewhere in ancient Mesopotamia, perhaps nestled between the bustling streets of Uruk or the quieter outskirts of Babylon. The air is heavy with the warm scent of baked clay and slowly drying mud bricks, mingled with a faint whisper of cedar incense. You might hear the distant murmur of a nearby river, its slow current lapping gently at the stone banks, carrying the soft echoes of life and time. The courtyard is shaded by low, leafy trees, perhaps a fig or date palm, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on the smooth, worn stones beneath your feet. The steady hum of quiet conversation drifts from rooms beyond, a soft chorus of voices telling stories, laughing quietly, or whispering secrets. The sun is low, casting a honeyed glow that makes the air shimmer ever so slightly, as if the very light holds the weight of countless ancient moments. A breeze stirs, carrying the faint rustle of papyrus scrolls and the delicate flutter of linen tunics. Around you, the walls are braided with vines, their tendrils seeming to breathe slowly, as though the courtyard itself inhales. In this space, time feels unhurried, as if centuries fold gently into one another, inviting you to settle in and listen closely. Now imagine that in this softly lit sanctuary, the intimate acts of life, the most private parts of human connection, are treated not with shame or secrecy, but with reverence and openness. Here, sexuality is a sacred, woven thread in the tapestry of daily existence. The Mesopotamians understood it as complex, messy, and deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the world around them. With the planting and the harvest, the rise of the river, the waxing and waning of the moon. It is not hidden behind closed doors, whispered about in embarrassment, or tucked away out of sight. Instead, it occupies a visible, respected place, as natural and necessary as the warm bread baked in the communal oven or the fragrant oil pressed from olives. You notice the scent of jasmine, mingling with earthy aromas rising from the mud floors. Perhaps a figure reclines nearby, their gaze serene and unhurried, as if discussing not just the crops or the weather, but the mysteries of human connection. The way desire and devotion can twist and turn like the roots of the ancient trees around you. The light flickers softly on the curved edges of carved stone reliefs depicting goddesses and gods entwined, their forms fluid and alive, reminding you that in this world, sexuality is not a source of discomfort, but an invitation to understand the divine within the human. The Mesopotamians believed that the very act of joining, whether between lovers, between mortal and divine, or between the earth and sky, was a form of sacred communion. This wasn't a neatly packaged idea with clear boundaries. It was complicated, sometimes contradictory, and often beautiful in its imperfection. The stories and rituals surrounding sex were woven into festivals and prayers, into poetry and temple ceremonies. It was as though each whispered touch or shared breath echoed the greater mysteries of creation itself. You might picture a temple priestess stepping through the courtyard, her steps slow and deliberate. She carries herself with a quiet dignity, knowing that her role is not just spiritual but also sensual, bridging the human and the divine. In her hands, she might hold a vessel of fragrant oils, ready to anoint those seeking blessings or healing. Her presence is a gentle reminder that sexuality here is an offering, a complex dance of power and vulnerability, celebration and ritual. This openness extends beyond the temple walls, too. In the marketplace, in the homes where family meals are shared, in the quiet corners where lovers meet under the olive trees, sex is not cloaked in shame but woven into the fabric of life, sometimes joyful, sometimes fraught, sometimes tender, sometimes chaotic. It is a space where stories are told and bodies remembered, where the sacred and the messy live side by side under the same sky. As you settle into this quiet courtyard, breathing in the scents and sounds, you begin to understand that here, the line between the sacred and the sensual is as delicate and shifting as the play of shadows on sunlit stone. And in that understanding, you feel a calm curiosity, an invitation to listen more closely to the stories that follow, where love and desire, power and tenderness intertwine in ways that are ancient, human, and quietly profound. As you settle deeper into this quiet room, the soft flicker of candlelight casting long shadows that dance lazily along the rough stone walls, you begin to feel the weight of unspoken rules pressing gently, insistently against your skin. Here, in this world long past, where the air still carries faint traces of frankincense and crushed herbs, you come to understand that things we might now think of as private, as tender moments between two people, were in ancient times threads woven tightly into the very fabric of society, threads that could either bind you safely within a sacred order or unravel your life in a breath. You lean back against the cool stone, the faint scent of smoke curling around your senses. Every touch, every whispered meeting held a potential far beyond mere affection. It was a language spoken in shadows, where the wrong glance or a misstep might summon a fury far more potent than anger, a danger wrapped in silence, as deadly as the sharpest blade hanging over ceremonial altars. The intimacy you might imagine as soft and warm had, on some days and in some places, the power to sanctify or to condemn. Imagine yourself walking softly through a time when the boundaries of closeness were etched out by ancestors who believed the gods watched from every corner, hovering just beyond your sight. You see, the rules you're about to discover are not like those you know now. They were carved in stone and whispered in temples, held under lock and key in the hearts of elders who might offer blessing or curse. This was a dance with consequences that could be as sacred as a ritual or as deadly as a secret betrayal. As you move through the dim corridors of memory and history, you notice how every gesture mattered. A touch on the hand, a glance held too long, a subtle shift in seating at a feast. These were not empty actions but charged moments, rituals laden with meaning. The sacredness of intimacy was intertwined with fear and respect, a precarious balance that held communities together and could tear them apart in a heartbeat. You might feel a quiet shiver as you imagine yourself caught between worlds, the warmth of closeness and the cold shadow of taboo. On one day, a lover's embrace could be a blessing, a shared flame that invited the favor of gods and spirits. On another, the same act might become a transgression, a defilement that demanded penance or exile. The line between devotion and danger was as thin as the parchment scrolls that carried these ancient laws, fragile and yet unyielding. As you breathe in this history, you might sense that intimacy was more than a private bond. It was a language of power and vulnerability, a sacred contract that connected people not only to one another, but to something far greater, something unseen but deeply felt. And yet this sacredness came with a price. You stepped lightly, aware that in these worlds from long ago, the rules were never far from your skin or your soul, shaping your every word and deed in ways both beautiful and ominous. So as you lie down now, ready to drift towards sleep, feel the quiet pulse of these ancient moments, the soft yet stern embrace of a time where love and fear, blessing and curse, stood side by side in a delicate, whispered balance. It's a reminder that what we hold close sometimes carries shadows as deep as the light, and that every touch, every word can be sacred or deadly, depending on the day. You find yourself standing at the threshold of a world both distant and startlingly familiar, where the whispers of ancient stones seem to murmur secrets long buried beneath layers of time and dust. There is a slow, almost imperceptible pulse here, like the steady inhale and exhale of a breathing earth, inviting you deeper into a realm woven with the delicate threads of desire, power, and the subtle art of punishment. Imagine for a moment that you are stepping barefoot across cool, worn flagstones, their surfaces smoothed by countless footsteps that preceded yours, soft echoes of lives lived in shadow and candlelight. As you move forward, the air thickens with the scent of burning incense, faint and lingering, weaving through the cool night like a silken veil. It carries with it the mysterious allure of distant temples and hidden chambers, places where stories unfolded in hushed voices and ritual gestures, where longing and authority danced in a quiet, endless waltz. Here, in this slumbering landscape, desire is neither rushed nor loud. It is the slow, mindful drawing of breath before a whispered confession, the gentle brush of fingertips tracing the outlines of power etched into cold marble and warm flesh alike. You can almost feel the weight of ancient parchment beneath your fingers, its surface rough but soft, carrying the faded ink of laws and legends, words that governed not only the bodies but the very souls of those who lived under their shadow. Power here is a tactile thing, wrapped in robes of fine linen or heavy leather, resting lightly on shoulders bent beneath the weight of responsibility and expectation. As you walk, you notice the cool touch of stone against your skin, hear the faint scrape of sandals on dirt-packed floors, and see the muted glow of oil lamps casting long, wavering shadows. There is a softness here, an intimacy in the way the past breathes around you, inviting you to lean in, to listen closely to the faint hum of stories that are as much about human frailty as they are about strength. Let yourself be carried by this quiet current, a gentle journey that unfolds not in bursts of drama, but in the slow unveiling of truths that lie beneath the surface of history's grand tapestry. Here, desire is not the desperate grasping at fleeting pleasure, but a patient, unhurried exploration of connection and control. Power is not thunderous command, but the subtle shaping of lives through whispered decrees and the weight of invisible chains. Punishment is not a sudden punishment, but a cycle of reflection and consequence, a somber dance performed in the dim light of ancient halls. You might imagine the soft rustle of silk robes as they glide across mosaic floors, the faint warmth of a hand resting lightly on a stone pillar, the mingled sense of myrrh and sweat lingering in the cool air. These moments, suspended in time, invite you to slow your own breath, to sink deeper into the quiet rhythm of an ancient world where every glance, every word, carried a meaning both fragile and profound. So, as you settle into this slow, steady rhythm, allow yourself to drift further into the unfolding story, one that will lead you gently through the corridors of desire and the chambers of power, through the whispers of punishment and the soft shadows of human complexity. Let your eyes grow heavy, your mind wander as the past draws close, wrapping you in its cool embrace, promising a journey both soothing and strange. There is no rush here, just the slow, deliberate unfolding of a story older than any memory, whispered softly into the night. And as you lie back, cradled by the quiet hush of history, you begin to see how the ancient world, so distant yet so intimately human, shaped the very ways we understand desire, wield power, and reckon with the delicate balance of justice and mercy. Breathe deeply now and step more fully into this ancient twilight, where the stories wait patiently, ready to unfold like the slow blooming of a night flower, open to the soft light of understanding. You find yourself stepping slowly through a quiet, ancient world, the air thick with the warm scent of burning cedarwood and sweet myrrh. The sun hangs low over a sprawling river valley, either the broad, life-giving Nile or the bustling, muddy banks of the Euphrates, where the fertile earth breathes under the gentle caress of a cooling breeze. Your bare feet softly press into the warm sand, and you can almost feel the rough texture of limestone beneath your fingertips, carved so carefully by hands long gone. Here in this cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia or Egypt, it matters little for now. You sense that everything, every breath and step, is steeped in the presence of the divine. The gods are never far away. They watch from towering ziggurats or soaring temple walls, their faces etched into stone, their stories whispered on the wind and flickering candlelight. And in this world, you begin to understand, sexuality is not hidden or hushed. It is not something to blush at or conceal behind closed doors. Instead, it is woven delicately and intimately into the fabric of religious life itself. The boundaries between human desire and divine will blur, forming sacred threads that connect the mortal to the eternal. As you wander deeper into one of these ancient cities, the hum of voices seems like a distant lullaby, a low chant drifting from temple courtyards. You catch the faintest echo of rhythmic drums and the soft rustle of linen robes. The temple is alive with rituals, and here, sexuality reveals itself as a sacred force, a language spoken between gods and people. You imagine the temple precincts, a serene labyrinth of sun-warmed stone chambers and shadowed alcoves. In these spaces, a special kind of worship takes place, where flesh and spirit meet in quiet communion. The temple priestesses, chosen for their purity and dedication, move with grace and purpose. They are the keepers of these sacred rites, sometimes called holy prostitutes, though this phrase, whispered through centuries, carries many misunderstandings. Their role is not one of base temptation, but a holy calling. They embody the goddess herself, Ishtar in Mesopotamia or Hathor in Egypt, the divine feminine principles of love, fertility, and life-giving energy. Through their presence and touch, they channel the blessings of the gods, serving as a living bridge between humanity and the divine realms. You can almost hear the soft murmur of prayers as the priestesses perform the ritual known as sacred marriage or hieros gamos. It is a profound ceremony where the earthly and the celestial entwine. A king or temple officiant might symbolically unite with a priestess, embodying the union of gods in the heavens. This joining is not merely symbolic. It is seen as a vital act that ensures fertility for the land, prosperity for the people, and harmony between worlds. In some temples, offerings to the gods take on an intensely intimate form. Sexuality becomes a gift, a language of devotion expressed through tender embrace or whispered invocation. You imagine the flickering torchlight casting dancing shadows on the sandstone walls as couples partake in rites that blend worship and desire. The air is filled with the scent of lotus blossoms and frankincense, mingling with the warmth of human closeness. The temple's atmosphere is hushed but heavy with meaning. Every touch, every glance is sacred. Through these acts, the priests and priestesses affirm the cycle of life, birth, death, and rebirth, as ordained by the gods. They believe that by honoring the creative power of sexuality, they maintain the balance of the cosmos itself. Outside the temple, the city pulses with life, markets hum with barter, children laugh, and the river flows steadily onward. But within these walls, time seems to slow. You feel as if you've stepped into a world where sensuality is not separated from the sacred, but deeply united with it. Here, the human body is a temple, a vessel for divine energy, and every act of love and union a whispered prayer. As you lie back on a cool stone bench in the temple garden, surrounded by the gentle rustle of papyrus reeds and the soft trickle of a nearby fountain, you sense the profound quiet of this ancient belief. Sexuality in all its forms is not merely a human impulse. It is a sacred rite, a bridge to the gods, and a vital thread in the delicate tapestry of life itself. And so, with the gentle night settling over this ancient city, you close your eyes and let the timeless whispers of temple love stories carry you slowly towards sleep, wrapped in the warmth of this strange and beautiful world where desire and divinity dance as one. You find yourself stepping quietly into the shadowed chamber of an ancient world, where the air holds the faint scent of burnt incense and aged papyrus. The flicker of candlelight dances softly along the carved stone walls, and you settle gently onto a cool, smooth bench, feeling the quiet weight of history envelop you like a soft, worn blanket. Here in this dim place, the stories of the pharaohs whisper through time, stories woven with threads of divine power, sacred bloodlines, and a peculiar kind of family closeness that might, at first, stir your surprise. Imagine the heat of the Egyptian sun pressing down on the vast sands outside, and at the heart of it all, the ruler of both gods and men, the pharaoh. But this was not merely a monarch in the ordinary sense. No, the pharaoh was a living god, an embodiment of the divine on earth, a bridge between the mortal and the eternal. And with such a monumental role came rituals and customs meticulously designed to preserve the purity of this godly essence. One of the most intimate, and to us perhaps the most unusual, was the practice of marrying within the family, often between siblings. You can almost hear the soft rustle of linen garments as the royal priests prepare the ceremonies. It is said that the pharaohs, believing themselves to be sons and daughters of gods like Ra or Osiris, felt their divine blood must remain uncontaminated by outside influences. Just as the Nile's waters must remain pure to nourish the land, so too must the royal bloodline be preserved in its pristine state. This purity was thought to be maintained by the sacred union between brothers and sisters, a symbol of cosmic order and eternal harmony. Picture, then, a solemn marriage ceremony in the golden halls of a palace near the river. The air is thick with the fragrance of lotus blossoms and myrrh, the soft murmur of chanting priests weaving a spell of sanctity around the couple. The brother and sister, both garbed in fine linens gleaming under the warm light of oil lamps, exchange vows not merely as siblings, but as divine partners. Their union is not born of earthly desire alone, but of a spiritual mission, to continue the lineage of gods walking among mortals. This cosmic partnership, strange though it may seem from your place and time, was deeply rooted in the Egyptians' understanding of the universe. To them, the family was a microcosm of the divine order, and the pharaoh's role was to sustain Ma'at, the sacred balance and truth that governed all life. By marrying within the family, the pharaoh reaffirmed this balance, ensuring that the divine spark remained unbroken, glowing bright and steady through generations. You might wonder how these intimate relationships shaped the lives of the pharaohs themselves. Behind the grand titles and the imposing statues, there were fragile human connections, touched by love, duty, and the heavy weight of expectation. The royal siblings, often close from childhood, grew up steeped in rituals and stories that told them they were more than mere family. They were sacred vessels. Their marriages, then, were both a personal and cosmic event, a delicate dance between affection and divine obligation. In some dynasties, this practice was not just common but essential. The famous Ptolemaic dynasty, for example, took this to a near-legendary extent. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of that line, was both sister and wife to her brothers. Their unions were as much political strategy as they were cultural tradition, cementing alliances within their own family and reinforcing the sacred claim to power. It is said that such marriages served as a tangible reminder that the gods themselves had ordained this unique arrangement. But it wasn't only about power or tradition. There was a deeper symbolism at work. The belief in the divine nature of the pharaoh extended to all aspects of their existence. Sexual purity, in this context, was seen as a way to maintain the connection between heaven and earth. The sacred bloodline needed to flow like a clear, untarnished river to carry the blessings of the gods to the people. The children born of these unions were considered especially potent, destined to inherit not just the throne, but the very essence of the divine. As you lie back, eyes half closed, the muffled sounds of the long-ago rituals seem to echo softly in your mind. You can almost feel the smooth texture of papyrus scrolls beneath your fingertips, inscribed with prayers and spells designed to protect this sacred union. The scent of frankincense lingers, mingling with the distant hum of the Nile, carrying secrets of a civilization that saw family, divinity, and duty as one inseparable thread. In this ancient world, the unusual closeness of pharaohs and their siblings was less an oddity and more a sacred tradition, a way to preserve the cosmic harmony that kept Egypt flourishing. These marriages were not just about blood, but about belief, an unbroken chain linking earth to sky and human to God, whispered softly through the sands of time. You find yourself standing quietly in the cool shadows of a vast temple courtyard, the stone worn smooth beneath your feet by centuries of bare soles and whispered prayers. The air is thick with a fragrant haze, the mingling of myrrh and cedar smoke curling gently upward, carried by a slow, steady breeze that seems to pause, as if holding its breath for what is about to unfold. Lanterns hanging from twisted cords cast a soft, golden glow, their flickering flames throwing dancing shadows upon the tall, carved pillars that enclose this sacred space. As you step closer, the scent deepens, enriched now by the subtle sweetness of crushed rose petals and pomegranate. Somewhere near, water trickles softly from a stone basin, the sound a quiet counterpoint to the distant murmur of voices in low, reverent tones. The temple itself feels alive, breathing, pulsing, an ancient being awakening for a night unlike any other. You are here for the sacred marriage, a ritual so old it seems stitched into the very fabric of the city's existence. Tonight, the high priest will become one with the goddess Ishtar, embracing her not only in spirit but through flesh and blood. It is a ceremony wrapped in mystery and bursting with significance, a union that promises fertility, protection, and the blessing of the gods upon the land. As you move through the dim corridors toward the heart of the temple, the walls become more intricate. Intricately inlaid lapis lazuli and gold leaf catch the lantern light, shimmering like the stars reflected in a dark pond. The air grows warmer, heavy with the mingled scents of frankincense and jasmine. You pause for a moment, letting your fingers brush against the smooth stone, feeling the faint vibrations of whispered hymns carried along the polished surfaces. Ahead, a chamber opens, draped in deep crimson and violet silks that hang like sacred curtains. The space is intimate, cocooned in a hushed stillness. Candles flicker on carved alabaster stands, their flames casting soft halos against the fabric walls. You notice the faint, almost imperceptible rustle of garments and the gentle breathing of those gathered here, priests, priestesses, and attendants, each cloaked in finely woven linen, their expressions serene yet charged with quiet anticipation. At the center of the chamber, an altar carved from gleaming white marble stands ready, adorned with offerings, shiny dates, pomegranates sliced open to reveal their gem-like seeds, and delicate bowls of honey and wine. The air hums with an unspoken promise, a palpable tension held tenderly between ritual and desire. You settle into the cool shadows as the high priest enters, his robes trailing softly behind him, embroidered with symbols of the moon and the lion, Ishtar's sacred animals. His presence is calm but commanding, like a steady flame in the darkness. Beside him steps the priestess, chosen to embody the goddess herself for this night. Her skin glows in the candlelight, smooth and warm, and her eyes glimmer with a quiet fire. She wears a crown woven from delicate flowers and gleaming lapis beads, the scent of fresh rosemary and mint trailing faintly in her wake. Their eyes meet briefly, and the room seems to hold its breath. Slowly they approach the altar, their movements measured and deliberate, each footfall a soft murmur on the stone floor. The high priest extends his hands, and the priestess places hers gently within his, a silent vow spoken in the language of touch. The officiating elder priest begins to chant in a low, rhythmic voice that vibrates through the chamber like the distant roll of thunder softened by distance. The words are ancient, woven from the very fabric of the cosmos, calling down blessings from the heavens, invoking the earth's fecundity, and weaving together the divine and mortal realms. The room feels warmer now, the air thick and fragrant, heavy with the scent of sandalwood and sweet grass burning steadily in bronze censers. You can almost feel the silk curtains ripple in an unseen breeze that carries the whispered prayers beyond the temple walls and into the night sky. The high priest and priestess move together now, a slow dance of union and surrender. Their fingers intertwine, palms pressing like the meeting of two worlds. You notice the delicate brush of skin against skin, the soft sighs that barely escape their lips, the subtle exchange of warmth and breath. There is a sacredness in their touch, a tender gravity that neither rushes nor falters. The ceremony steps deeper into its mystery as the priestess begins to chant, her voice clear and steady, weaving a melody that seems to ripple through the air, calling forth the goddess Ishtar's strength, love, and ferocity. The high priest responds with whispered affirmations, their voices weaving a tapestry of sound that envelops the room like a warm cloak. As the ritual unfolds, elements of the sensual and the spiritual meld seamlessly. You become aware of the fine linen garments slipping away, replaced by skin kissed by soft light. The scent of jasmine and rose deepens, mingling with the earthy musk of human presence. The cool stone beneath their feet contrasts with the rising heat between them, a heat born not just of physical connection but of sacred intention. Their bodies move with reverence, the rhythm slow and deliberate, each gesture a prayer, each breath an invocation. You can almost feel the pulse of the city itself, awake and alive in this moment of divine union, as if the very earth beneath the temple is responding, fertile and expectant. Around them, the attendants maintain a respectful distance, their eyes lowered in solemn witness. The flickering candlelight paints their faces with a softness that borders on the ethereal, and the shadows seem to lean in, attentive to the unfolding mystery. You notice the warmth of the priestess's skin as it brushes against the high priest's hands, the gentle rise and fall of their chests as they share breaths in quiet synchrony. There is an intimacy here that transcends mere ceremony, a binding of flesh and spirit, mortal and divine, that echoes the earliest human attempts to touch the sacred. Outside the chamber, the city sleeps under a blanket of stars, unaware or perhaps quietly blessed by the night's ritual. Inside, time seems to slow, folding in on itself like the delicate petals of the pomegranate offered on the altar, a symbol of life, death, and rebirth intertwined. As the sacred marriage draws to its close, the high priest and priestess return to their ceremonial garments, the soft rustle of fabric a gentle whisper in the stillness. They share a final look, a quiet gratitude shimmering between them like a shared secret. You step back into the corridor, the lingering sense of incense and rose petals clinging softly to your skin. The temple feels different now, still sacred, still ancient, but somehow touched by a newfound tenderness, as if the night itself has been softly rewritten by the union you have just witnessed. Outside, the breeze carries the faint echo of chants and the subtle promise of fertility, prosperity, and protection whispered into the sleeping city. And you, wrapped in the quiet embrace of history and ritual, find yourself gently drifting toward sleep, comforted by the slow dance of gods and mortals, love and devotion, played out beneath ancient Babylonian stars. You lie there in the soft flickering shadow of the temple's inner sanctum, the air thick with the scent of incense, a mingling of sandalwood and something earthier, damp stone warmed by the heat of a nearby brazier. Your skin pricks with the cool touch of the smooth marble floor beneath you, grounding you amid the whispering voices of the priests and the low, distant murmurs from the gathering crowd beyond the heavy curtains. Here in this sacred space, your body becomes more than your own. It is a vessel, a channel, a living offering. You feel the weight of the moment settle over you like a tangible thing, as if the breath of the gods themselves lingers in the air, invisible yet insistent. There is no choice, really. The selection has already been made, the decision whispered in hushed tones long before you were summoned. You did not volunteer, nor did you refuse. There is no refusal, only acceptance, a quiet surrender to a role carved out by tradition and fear, by the endless rhythms of a world you barely understand but cannot escape. It is striking how terrifyingly casual it all is. The way the priests move around you, their hands gentle but possessive, touching your skin as if it were both fragile and sacred stone. You are meant to please the gods, to embody their will and desires, to carry out rites as old as time itself. And yet, the ritual unfolds with an almost everyday simplicity, a matter-of-factness that chills you beneath the warmth of torchlight. The gods are pleased with your body, your breath, your presence. Your body is their altar, their temple, their mystery, and you are both honored and haunted by this duality. There is no room for fear, except the quiet, gnawing kind that settles in the pit of your stomach. You are chosen for reasons you do not understand, to perform acts whose meaning is wrapped in layers of symbolism and ancient belief. Your body becomes a medium through which the divine speaks, a living offering to forces beyond mortal comprehension. And yet, while your hands tremble and your heart hammers against your ribs, the voices around you remain calm, indistinct, routine. This is just another ceremony, another night where flesh is entwined with faith, where the sacred and the corporeal dance in slow, deliberate steps. You have no illusions about what this might mean. The priests' faces are serene but unreadable, their eyes reflecting candlelight and conviction. The temple is cold but alive, filled with the quiet rustling of silk and the low murmur of incantations. You can almost feel the history pressing down on you. Generations of bodies and souls given over in the name of divine favor, in the hope that the rains will come, that the crops will grow, that the city will endure. And so you do not resist. You close your eyes and let your breath steady, the faint pulse in your temples syncing with the slow rhythm of the chants. The fear is still there, a shadow lurking beneath your skin, but it softens into a strange kind of calm, the calm of inevitability, of surrender to a tradition that is both cruel and strangely beautiful. Your body, in all its vulnerability, is a sacred offering, a symbol of connection between the mortal and the divine. And in this moment, As your skin brushes against warm hands and murmured prayers, you understand that pleasing the gods is an act both intimate and impersonal, routine and extraordinary, terrifying and strangely ordinary. You step inside this ancient rhythm, carried by the gentle insistence of unseen forces, by the murmured hopes of a people who believe in the power of flesh and faith intertwined. And as the night deepens and the ceremony unfolds in its slow, deliberate way, you find yourself drifting into a quiet place, not of fear, but of acceptance. Your body is no longer just your own. It is a vessel, a story, a whispered prayer offered under candlelight and stone, under the watchful eyes of gods who demand much, but ask for nothing but your presence. You step quietly through the warm, sun-dappled courtyard of an ancient Greek gymnasium, the air around you thick with the gentle scent of olive oil and the faintest trace of dust rising from the stone floor. The walls, rubbed smooth by the hands of countless visitors, catch the golden light and seem almost to glow. Here, time moves slowly, measured by the rhythmic sound of sandals brushing against stone, the murmur of voices speaking softly, thoughtfully, as if sharing secrets meant only for the ears present. This is a place unlike any you've known, a sanctuary not only for the body but for the mind and the heart. The gymnasium, in classical Greece, is far more than a simple arena for physical exercise. It is a living, breathing social hub where nearly every facet of life intertwines: the athletic, the intellectual, the emotional, and the intimate. You can almost feel the reverberation of centuries holding their breath within these columns, the steady pulse of dialogue and connection that made this space sacred in its own quiet way. As you move slowly along the edge of the courtyard, you notice groups of young men gathered beneath the dappled shade of olive trees. Their bodies are slender, sun-kissed, still soft with youth, but their eyes carry the flicker of curiosity and learning. Nearby, older men, their faces etched with the patina of experience, lean into these clusters with gentle patience. There is a tenderness in their gazes as well as a subtle respect, an understanding that here, something more complex than simple friendship is unfolding, mentorship wrapped in care, and within that, a kind of desire that today's world might find uncomfortable or difficult to grasp. It is important, perhaps even necessary, to speak of this openly, but carefully and with kindness. In this place and time, the feelings and relationships between older men and adolescent boys are woven into the very fabric of society. The bond they share carries a weight that is both educational and profoundly personal. This form of love and affection, known to the ancient Greeks with terms like paiderastia, is not merely about desire. It is about guidance, affection, and the nurturing of virtue. Imagine the cool touch of a hand resting lightly on a shoulder, a whispered conversation about poetry or philosophy, the sharing of wisdom beneath the soft rustling of leaves. These moments are tender and deliberate, a dance of trust and admiration that holds the promise of growth, physical, intellectual, and moral. You can almost hear the quiet laughter mingling with the rustle of parchment and the distant clang of sandals on stone, a soundtrack to a world where education is inseparable from human connection. The gymnasium itself is designed to encourage this blending of body and mind. You see the open areas where vigorous exercise takes place: wrestling, running, discus throwing. But you also sense the quieter spaces set aside for conversation and contemplation, where men and boys debate the latest philosophical ideas or recite verses from Homer's epics. This interplay of the physical and intellectual is deliberate, almost sacred. Here, the body is not something to be hidden or dismissed, but rather celebrated as a vessel for the soul's deeper pursuits. As you settle on a smooth stone bench beneath a blooming laurel tree, the cool shade caresses your skin, and you notice how the atmosphere shifts with the slow, steady movement of the afternoon sun. The scent of freshly crushed herbs mingles with the faint, smoky tendrils of incense burning somewhere just out of sight, creating a heady fragrance that seems to slow your breath and soften your thoughts. It is easy here to feel the weight of centuries settle softly around you, as if you're sharing a whispered secret with the past itself. Within this gentle, drowsy haze, the social fabric of the gymnasium unfolds in quiet detail. You see not only the tender bonds of mentorship and affection, but the ordinary rituals of daily life. The exchange of greetings, the careful anointing of muscles with scented oils, the murmured debates on justice and beauty. The gymnasium is a world apart, a place that nurtures the whole person, not just the body or the mind alone. It teaches patience, discipline, and loyalty, but also openness and vulnerability. It is important to acknowledge the complexity here. By modern standards, the relationships you observe might raise questions or discomfort. Yet, in this time and place, they are normalized, integrated into the rhythms of daily life without shame or secrecy. The society around you does not see these bonds as merely physical, but as deeply entwined with the progression from youth to adulthood, from ignorance to wisdom. They are understood as part of the natural order, a form of love that, while different from the relationships you might know today, holds its own honor and meaning. And so, as shadows lengthen and the soft light dims to a pale amber, you lie back against the cool stone, feeling the sun-warmed air settle around you like a gentle blanket. Here in this ancient gymnasium, you've witnessed a different kind of community, a world where the lines between teacher and student, friend and lover, body and soul blur softly in the glow of understanding. You close your eyes, breathing in the scent of olive trees and incense, the tender murmur of thoughtful conversation fading into a hush. In this timeless place, history cradles you gently, inviting you to rest in the quiet mystery of human connection, complex, imperfect, and profoundly human all at once. You find yourself in a quiet, shadowed room, the air scented faintly with the lingering trace of burning myrrh and warm beeswax candles. The soft flicker of their flames casts gentle dances of light and shadow upon the ancient, time-worn scrolls resting on a wooden table, their surfaces rough and delicate beneath your fingertips. Here, in this space of tranquil contemplation, you are invited to step into the hushed world of philosophical love, where the whispers of yearning and wisdom intertwine like ivy on ancient stone. It is in the folds of this age-old thought that you encounter the figure of Plato, a man whose voice seems to linger in the stillness, soft, knowing, and endlessly curious. Plato's words are not hurried declarations, but gentle ripples on a still pond, inviting you to peer deeper beneath the surface of love's many forms. To him, love, especially the kind that stirs the soul, is far more than fleeting desire or simple companionship. It is a sacred journey, a ladder ascending through realms of beauty and understanding, each rung bringing you closer to a profound kind of wisdom. Imagine, if you will, the cool marble steps of the academy, worn smooth by centuries of seekers. As you climb slowly, you feel the weight of countless thoughts resting on each step, carrying you toward the luminous summit of truth. Here, Plato's symposium unfolds like a tapestry of voices, each speaker weaving together their own delicate threads of insight about Eros, the god of love. It is a gathering not of boisterous revelry, but of quiet profundity. Their words hover in the air, a gentle hum, a fragrant incense curling upwards, inviting your mind to wander in soft spirals of reflection. Plato speaks of a love that begins not with the body alone, but with the soul stirring toward something beyond mere flesh. You imagine this love as a gentle flame, glowing softly in the hearth of your chest, warming but not consuming. It is a yearning to recognize, to know, and to be known, not just in passing glances or whispered promises, but in the silent communion of minds and spirits. This love seeks the eternal, the beautiful in its purest form, a beauty that transcends the transient and touches the divine. You feel the texture of the moment, as if wrapped in the folds of a soft cloak, the cool stone beneath you grounding your thoughts. Plato suggests that through this love, a kind of awakening occurs, an alchemy of sorts, where desire refines itself into a yearning for truth and goodness. The body becomes a vessel, yes, but not the destination. The lover's gaze lifts upward, tracing the contours of ideals and virtues, their soul blossoming in the light of understanding. It is a tender paradox, the erotic entwined with the spiritual, the physical with the intellectual, weaving together like threads of silk in a delicate tapestry. You imagine the sensation, the gentle brush of a hand, not hurried or frantic, but deliberate and full of reverence. The heart quickens, yet the mind remains serene, as if floating on a calm sea beneath a sky brushed with stars. This is not a love of reckless abandon, but of quiet elevation. And yet, Plato is not alone in this whispering chorus. Other thinkers of antiquity, those shadows beside him in the flickering candlelight, also open their tablets and voices to this delicate subject. They write, often in parchment-stained script, of how erotic passion can serve as a teacher, a guide that leads the soul through veils of illusion toward clarity and grace. This love, they say, is an invitation, gentle pulling at the heartstrings to remind us of our connection to something far grander than ourselves. The Greek poets and philosophers understood that love, in its deepest form, is not merely a flame to be kindled and then extinguished. It is a river, slow and steady, carving canyons of insight and shaping landscapes of the soul. They explore how the erotic can dissolve barriers, revealing the hidden harmony beneath apparent opposites, pleasure and pain, self and other, mortal and divine. As you breathe in the quiet warmth of this room, you almost hear the rustle of parchment and the soft scratch of quill on paper, the gentle murmur of voices sharing truths across the centuries. These are not declarations shouted from rooftops, but gentle confidences, shared in the hush of twilight when the world is wrapped in the velvet cloak of night. Philosophical love is described as a pilgrimage, pure, patient, and infinitely unfolding. It is the recognition that in loving another, you glimpse a reflection of something eternal. The beauty you see in a friend, a mentor, or even a stranger is a spark of that divine form, a momentary, shimmering doorway to understanding. This love asks you to look beyond the surface, to listen with quiet reverence to the silent music beneath words and gestures. You lie back in this reverie, the soft shadows playing across your eyelids, the scent of ancient pages mingling with the faint spice of distant forests. The whisper of these thoughts soothes the restless heart, like a lullaby sung in a language older than time itself. You come to realize that in this slow dance of philosophical love, every glance, every touch, every whispered thought is part of a larger story, a story about seeking, yearning, and ultimately awakening. So, as you drift gently towards sleep, carried on the soft currents of understanding and desire, remember this. Love, when touched by wisdom, becomes a quiet flame that never truly dies. It burns softly, illuminating the dark corners of the soul, inviting you to dream not only of another but of the luminous beauty that lies within. And in this dreaming, you find a kind of peace, deep, abiding, and endlessly mysterious. Rest now with these gentle whispers in your heart, and let the shadows cradle you in their timeless embrace. You walk quietly along a narrow, stone-paved pathway, the worn cobbles cool beneath your bare feet. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of burning tallow from flickering candles, mingling with the earthy aroma of ancient parchment and dusty tomes stacked carefully in shadowed alcoves. You step inside a dimly lit chamber where the air seems thick with quiet whispers and secrets, a sanctuary devoted to learning and the intricate dance of mentorship. Here, the world you knew seems to shift slightly, as if the very atmosphere holds a different kind of gravity, one shaped as much by human closeness as by scholarly endeavor. You find yourself among young apprentices and their mentors, the bond between them, unfolding in subtle, indistinct ways. The line between guidance and intimacy, between instruction and affection, weaves delicately through the moments you observe. You take a seat on a rough-hewn wooden bench, your fingers tracing the grain of the surface, smooth from years of restless hands. Across from you, a mentor leans close to a pupil, their voices soft and low, a murmur that blends with the crackle of the hearth fire. The pupil's eyes are wide, filled with a mixture of eagerness and uncertainty, their breath catching slightly as the mentor's hand briefly brushes a stray lock of hair from their forehead. You notice how the air seems to hum with an unspoken tension, neither quite spoken nor fully understood, a close, almost intimate connection that feels both natural and complicated. The mentor's role is one of authority and wisdom, their presence anchoring the young learner's tentative steps into a vast world of knowledge. Yet, beneath this surface of instruction, there lingers a quieter, more delicate kind of closeness. The room is scented faintly with beeswax and lavender, a comforting perfume meant to soothe and focus the restless minds gathered here. You hear the soft rustle of parchment as a teacher unfurls a scroll, guiding the student's gaze to the elegant script that curves across the page like waves on a gentle sea. Each letter is a whispered secret, a carefully guarded fragment of wisdom passed down through generations. But your attention is drawn again to the subtle gestures, the tentative touch on a shoulder, the way the pupil leans slightly closer, seeking approval or understanding, the mentor's voice dropping to a gentle murmur, as if sharing something meant only for one another. It is a world where boundaries blur, where the line between learning and affection becomes a twilight zone of whispered words and shared silences. You imagine the confusion that must sometimes ripple through these young minds, caught between the desire to absorb knowledge and the stirrings of feelings they have yet to name. The room's shadows stretch and flicker against the walls, casting shapes that seem to mirror the ambiguity of these connections, sometimes clear, sometimes elusive, often trembling on the edge of recognition. You breathe in the faint scent of musk mixed with aged leather, a reminder of bodies closed together in quiet study, the warmth of shared space, the soft shuffle of feet on stone floors. There is a tenderness here, an intimacy rooted in trust and vulnerability, but also a cautiousness born of unspoken rules and the weight of societal expectation. The mentor's gaze holds the pupils a moment longer than necessary, and you feel the electric hush of that glance. A language without words, a contract both fragile and binding. You can almost hear the internal dialogue swirling beneath the calm surface. Confusion, curiosity, longing, the search for identity in a world that demands silence. As you sit a little longer, you become aware of the pulsating rhythm of this place, the slow, methodical unfolding of lessons that reach beyond texts and scrolls, touching upon the very essence of growing up, of becoming someone amid a tangle of desire and discipline. You imagine the lanterns gently swaying above, their warm glow casting a protective circle around this space where knowledge and the complexities of human connection intertwine. It is a place both safe and uncertain, where mentorship carries the weight of responsibility and the delicate promise of something more, something quietly unfolding in the shadows. The pupil shifts nervously, voice barely above a whisper, asking a question that seems to hang between them like a fragile thread. The mentor answers with kindness, patience, their words both instruction and reassurance. You sense the depth of this bond, a weave of guidance and care, of youth stepping tentatively into a complicated world, and wisdom reaching out with steady hands. Here, in this hushed chamber, education is not merely the transfer of knowledge, but an immersive experience of intimacy and ambiguity. You lie back in your mind's eye, feeling the cool stone beneath you, the scent of old books and whispered secrets filling your senses, and you understand that learning, in this place and time, is as much about the heart's quiet stirrings as it is about the mind's steady growth. Slowly, you let your thoughts drift, carried by the soft cadence of murmured lessons and the gentle brush of fingertips, the blessing and the burden of mentorship wrapped in shadow and candlelight. And as you close your eyes, the line between education and affection fades, leaving only the tender, complex pulse of human connection that lingers long after the candles have burned low. You find yourself stepping softly through the cool marble corridors of a Roman bathhouse, the air heavy with the mingled scents of warm stone, faint incense, and the subtle tinge of oils and perfumes. The sun, just beginning to dip below the horizon, filters through small, latticed windows, scattering delicate golden patterns across the mosaic floors. Your footsteps echo quietly, almost swallowed by the gentle murmur of dripping water and whispered conversations. Around you, the bathhouse unfurls like a sanctuary of touch and sight, a place where the boundaries between the public and the intimate gracefully dissolve. Here, the ritual of bathing is not merely about cleanliness, but an intricate dance of social connection, an artful performance of presence and attention. You can feel the smoothness of the cool marble beneath your fingertips as you trace the edges of a basin filled with steaming water, steam curling lazily upward and softening the air. Nearby, figures recline on stone benches, their skin glistening with oil, bodies relaxed and open. Eyes meet, not in hurried glances but in lingering, deliberate exchanges. The gaze is both invitation and acknowledgement, a gentle conversation without words. In this space, touch is an essential language. A hand brushes a shoulder lightly, tracing a casual path as if by chance, but laden with intent. Fingers graze an arm in passing, not hurried but slow and confident, an unspoken promise of shared understanding. The contact is never abrupt. It floats like a feather's caress, warm with the heat of the bathwater, familiar and yet charged with quiet possibility. You might notice a pair of men seated close, their conversation soft, punctuated by subtle touches. A hand resting briefly on a knee, a finger tracing a line along a forearm. Their eyes hold each other's gaze, not with urgency, but with a steady, patient devotion, as if exploring a landscape of feelings too delicate for words. This is the public seduction of the bathhouse, open and unashamed, yet tender and respectful. The architecture itself seems to encourage this gentle interplay. Niches carved into the walls provide semi-private alcoves where couples or friends can lean close, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows upon their faces. The air shimmers with a warmth that invites vulnerability, the blending of voices and laughter as soft as the breath between lovers. Across the room, a larger group gathers in the tepid waters of the caldarium. They recline on submerged benches, the water rising just below their chests, creating a shared experience of comfort and closeness. Fingers playfully ripple the surface, occasionally touching another's palm with a lightness that lingers. The atmosphere is one of slow, deliberate connection, an embrace extended through time and space rather than hurried contact. Now, imagine drifting from this Roman sanctuary to the soft candlelit chamber of a Greek symposium, where the air hums with the scent of sweet wine and burning oil lamps. Here the night stretches ahead like a velvet curtain, waiting to be gently pulled back by laughter, poetry, and whispered confidences. In the symposium's intimacy, you recline on a cushioned couch, your head resting lightly on the soft fabric. Your companions are similarly relaxed, the rhythm of their voices slow and measured, as they share stories and philosophies under the warm glow of oil lamps. Here, too, eyes are the currency of connection, soft, searching glances that linger just a moment too long, a silent conversation unfolding beneath the surface of words. As arm brushes arm during the passing of a wine cup, the touch feels deliberate, yet casual, an easy intimacy woven into the ritual of shared drink. Hands meet over the smooth surface of the ceramic kylix, fingers interlacing briefly, a small spark of recognition flickering in the dim light. The contact is a gentle reminder of presence, a bridge across the space between bodies. You sense the easy fluidity of the evening, where gestures and glances carry more weight than spoken declarations. The art of seduction here is subtle and refined, a game played with lowered lids and half-smiles. When eyes meet, there is an unspoken invitation to lean closer, to share a breath, to exchange a secret held close to the heart. Perhaps a performer begins to recite a poem, their voice low and musical, drawing listeners deeper into the spell of the moment. Hands fold around wine cups, warmth seeping into the fingers while another's palm brushes the back of a neck, a touch that lingers like the fading echo of a song. The room seems to pulse with a quiet energy, a collective awareness of the fragile beauty in these shared moments. Throughout the symposium, physicality is neither hurried nor overt. It is woven seamlessly into the fabric of companionship and conversation. Touch is a language of subtlety, an eyebrow raised just so, a finger lightly tracing a pattern on the back of a hand, a shoulder nudged softly in encouragement. The eyes speak volumes, conveying desire and appreciation with the gentlest of glances. In both the Roman bathhouse and the Greek symposium, you witness a world where public seduction unfolds with a calm grace, where the interplay of touch and gaze is neither rushed nor shameful, but a natural extension of human connection. The sensuality is quiet, caressing, like the soft flicker of candlelight against stone walls, never demanding but always inviting. As you lie back, perhaps imagining yourself enveloped in the gentle warmth of these ancient spaces. The steady rhythm of whispered words and the brush of fingertips becomes a lullaby, a slow, tender exploration of desire and friendship, woven seamlessly into the tapestry of daily life. In this world, intimacy is not hidden but shared, a delicate dance beneath the watchful eyes of history, gentle as the night itself. You step inside a dimly lit triclinium, the formal dining room of a Roman domus, where the air hangs heavy with the scents of spiced wine and roasted meats. Candlelight flickers softly, casting long shadows that dance along the frescoed walls. The smell of burning oil from bronze lamps mingles with the faint, earthy aroma of damp stone beneath your feet, grounding you firmly in this ancient space. The cushions upon which you recline are plush, though slightly worn from countless evenings just like this one, where friends and acquaintances gather in quiet celebration of the day's end. The walls are alive with color, faded yet vivid in the flickering light. Murals depict scenes both mythic and mundane. Satyrs chasing nymphs through sylvan groves, Bacchus raising his goblet amid revelry, and figures caught mid-laugh with lips parted in what you can almost hear as a low, knowing chuckle. There's a playfulness etched in these images, a nod to the lighter, sometimes more ribald spirit that defines the evening's tone. You notice small details, a vine of ivy curling along the contours of a pillar, its leaves seemingly quivering in the half-dark. The smooth, cool marble of the dining couches beneath your fingertips, the subtle stickiness of honey and olive oil still clinging faintly to the bronze trays from an earlier course. Outside, the soft murmur of voices drifts through an open window, mingling with the distant clink of amphorae being stacked in the kitchen. In Roman society, dinner parties or convivium were not just about nourishment. They were social rituals, woven with intricate etiquette but also unshackled moments of humor and bodily honesty. Though the term orgy often misleads us into imagining wild abandon as the norm, the truth is more subtle and perhaps more charming. Suggestive acts, sly gestures, and crude jokes were the true currency here. They were exchanged with a wink, a raised eyebrow, or a knowing smirk. These evenings provided a space where the strictures of daily life loosened, and laughter, a little coarse, sometimes laced with double meanings, rose like the sweet smoke from copal incense burning in delicate holders. You imagine the guests reclining on their couches, togas slightly loosened, sandals kicked off and forgotten by the door. Conversations flow like the wine, moving from the seriousness of politics and poetry to the ridiculousness of bodily functions and flirtatious banter. Between courses of oysters, dormice stuffed with pine nuts, and figs dipped in honey, a guest might lean in with a half-whispered innuendo, causing a ripple of amused sighs and covert glances. If you could peer behind the veil of propriety, the graffiti scratched into the walls elsewhere in the city would confirm much of this. In Pompeii, for example, walls were canvases for the unfiltered thoughts of passers-by, some tender, many crude. "We two dear men, friends forever," were here. "If you want to know our names, they are Gaius and Aulus," reads one inscription, a testament to friendship. Nearby, in coarser script, a different message brags about sexual conquests or jeers at the prowess of a rival. The frescoes in these places reflect the same candid spirit. They hint at the pleasures and follies of mortal life with a mixture of reverence and irreverence. A painting might show a reclining figure offering a goblet to a servant with more than just wine in mind, or a cheeky Cupid aiming his arrow with a mischievous grin. It is as if the walls themselves join in the evening's conviviality, whispering secrets and shared blushes across the centuries. The hosts would have been keenly aware of this delicate dance between decorum and desire. The setting was crafted to invite ease, soft cushions to cradle weary limbs, the gentle clatter of silverware mingling with the low murmur of conversation, the smooth glide of fine olive oil over roasted dormouse meat. And yet beneath the surface, a current of playful tension hummed, alive with the promise of laughter that might edge into something more daring. In the glow of oil lamps, a guest leans over to whisper a bawdy limerick, voice just above a breath, sending ripples of suppressed giggles around the room. A young slave offers another cup of diluted Falernian wine, eyes flicking downward, prompting a sly grin from the master of the house. The line between joke and invitation blurs in this warm cocoon of dim light and soft murmurs. Here you feel the pulse of Roman life, its blend of formality and freedom, its willingness to embrace the imperfect, the messy, the human. This is not the stuff of grand historical monuments, but of lived experience. The quiet thrill of a whispered joke, the comfort of shared indulgence, the fleeting brush of fingers across a folded cloth napkin. You lie back on your couch, the smooth coolness meeting your skin, and gaze at the ceiling where faint shadows flicker like restless spirits. Somewhere beyond these walls, the city hums with life. But here, in this chamber wrapped in warmth and whispered laughter, you are invited to linger in a moment suspended between propriety and pleasure. And so the evening unfolds, neither wild nor chaotic, but a gentle weaving of human connection, salted with humor and a hint of the suggestive. It is, in its own way, a dance as old as time, played out in the quiet spaces between the words, the knowing glances, and the unspoken stories scrawled in shadow and light along these ancient walls. You settle deeper into the quiet folds of the past, where the world feels heavier, shaped by invisible strings of power tugging gently but firmly in every direction. Imagine yourself stepping softly into a grand, dimly lit hall, the air thick with the faint scent of burning tallow candles, their flickering shadows trembling against cold stone walls. Here in this shadowed space, the rules of who could say yes, and more importantly, who could say no, were etched deep into the very fabric of life. You notice how the grand tapestry on the wall seems to ripple not just with threads, but with stories of authority and submission, of voices rising and being stifled. In this world, power was a quiet, relentless current, one that flowed only in certain channels, never branching out to those who might have needed it most. Take, for a moment, the figure of the slave. You can almost hear the soft scrape of worn sandals against dusty earth, the low murmur of voices muffled beneath the weight of chains. Slaves could not say no. Their lives were not their own. Each gesture, each breath, carefully measured against the grim ledger of ownership. Their bodies and wills were possessions, traded and commanded with the cold certainty of a ledger book. To refuse was a perilous act, inviting punishment, pain, or worse, an outcome often whispered about in the hush of night beneath flickering lamplight. Women, too, lived within cages made not of iron, but of expectation and law, their voices often restrained by the delicate lace of social convention. While their thoughts and feelings brimmed quietly beneath the surface, the world outside rarely invited their dissent. Imagine a woman standing by a small window, the soft light dappling her face, her hands folded, her eyes tracing the gentle curves of the garden beyond, the one place where she might feel some fleeting sense of freedom. Yet in daily life she was tethered, her choices circumscribed by the decisions of fathers, husbands, brothers, men whose authority was both assumed and enforced. The right to say no belonged almost exclusively to them. And then there were the poor, those who labored from dawn's first cold breath until the stars blinked awake in the night sky. Their lives were a slow, steady rhythm of toil and submission. To them, saying no was a luxury afforded only to the wealthy and the powerful. For the poor, refusal meant hunger, eviction, or violence. Their silence was often born from necessity, a quiet acceptance carved from the harsh stone of survival. Contrast these lives with those of the rich men who sat in woven chairs by roaring hearths, their hands warm from goblets of wine and scrolls of parchment, their laughter filling the air like soft thunder. Men who could say no with ease, their refusals shaping destinies. They decreed laws, owned lands stretching beyond the horizon, and controlled the fate of those whose names were never recorded in the annals of history. Their power was a gentle, persistent pressure, an unseen weight pressing down on the world around them. As you breathe in the faint coolness of the room, you might notice the subtle injustice woven through this tapestry of power. It is not loud or brash, but there, an undercurrent of quiet exclusion, a whisper in the dark corners where voices struggle to rise. You might find yourself pondering how the softest of no's, the faintest refusal, could ripple across generations, or how the absence of a no, the enforced acquiescence, shaped entire societies. It's as if the world held its breath around those who dared not speak, while those who could command no did so with a casual certainty that was both unsettling and oddly serene in its inevitability. In this delicate balance of power, you begin to see how the simple act of saying no was itself a kind of rebellion, rare and precious, a fragile spark in the muted glow of a long-past evening. You lie back now, the scent of musty parchment and smoldering incense lingering as a reminder that history is not just dates and battles, but the quiet, often painful stories of those who had no choice but to soften their voices and say nothing. You find yourself wandering down a narrow, shadowed alleyway in ancient Rome, the stones beneath your feet worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, some hurried, others lingering. The warm night air carries the faint scent of olive oil and the crisp smoke of distant torches. As you lean in closer to the cool, rough wall beside you, you notice carvings and scribbles, the local graffiti, a patchwork of whispers from everyday Romans who, perhaps like you, once paused here in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn. But here, in this hidden gallery of words and images, something unusual catches your eye. Among the familiar political jabs, poetic fragments, and crude jokes lies a peculiar obsession that seems to ripple through the fabric of Roman life, an almost reverent fixation on size and performance, particularly male virility. It is as if the Romans had their own secret language of desire, one where the measure of a man's worth was, somewhat literally, set in stone. You brush your fingers over a small, etched figure, a phallus boldly prominent, carved with confident strokes. These unmistakable symbols, known as fascinum, were everywhere in Rome, from the walls of homes to bustling marketplaces. They stood as guardians, talismans against the evil eye, but also celebrated fertility and sexual power with unabashed pride. The Romans did not shy away from such displays. Instead, they embraced them with a candidness that might feel startling to you. The phallus was not merely a private matter, but a communal emblem, an icon of protection and potency, made visible to all who passed. Your eyes trace the outline of a larger statue, its features exaggerated almost beyond belief. Towering in the corner of a garden, it depicts a winged figure brandishing a massive phallus, a symbol not only of virility but of divine strength and luck. This figure, the god Priapus, was something like the ancient Roman mascot for good fortune and fertility, a guardian of gardens and fields, but also a reminder that size in their world was a currency of power. You imagine the flickering torchlight casting long shadows across his exaggerated form, his presence both amusing and strangely comforting to those who sought reassurance in his exaggerated gifts. Pausing to breathe in the faint scent of damp earth and crushed herbs, you consider how these symbols were more than just decoration. The Romans were a people who valued performance, physical, social, even sexual, much more than you might expect. Size and the ability to impress or satisfy was woven into their understanding of masculinity and success. This obsession wasn't confined to statues and spells. It spilled into everyday life. Glancing back at the graffiti, you notice inscriptions that range from boastful to intimate, penned in hasty but deliberate scrawls. Lucius can outlast the sunrise, one declares, while another confesses, Julia dreams of Titus's endless vigor. These scribbles are like quiet murmurs frozen in stone, revealing a culture fascinated by endurance and prowess. It's as though the Romans found themselves caught in an endless conversation about who could perform better, last longer, impress more deeply. Amid these walls of whispered secrets, you uncover something even more intriguing. Magical spells, etched onto thin sheets of lead or painted onto tiny parchment scrolls. These were not mere curiosities but personal talismans, often buried under thresholds or tucked into the folds of clothing, designed to enhance one's virility or protect against impotence. Some spells call upon gods and spirits with quiet desperation, invoking obscure rituals to transform the very essence of a man's power. One spell, almost tender in its simplicity, begs the gods to make the phallus mighty as Jupiter's thunderbolt, a vivid image that mixes divine force with intimate desire. Another promises that the spear of love shall never falter, nor the flame grow cold. You feel the weight of these words, not just as magical formulae, but as human hopes bound in ink and metal, a testament to an ancient struggle with insecurity and longing that transcends time. The gentle rustle of leaves in the nearby garden brings your attention back to the present moment, a reminder that these obsessions, these stories, were part of daily life. The conversations whispered under candlelight, the rituals performed in quiet chambers, the bravado displayed in public forums. The Romans, with their towering temples and sprawling forums, might seem grand and distant. Yet here, in these intimate traces, you encounter their very human preoccupations, not just with empire or conquest, but with the size and stamina of the male body. You might smile softly at the candidness, the unabashed celebration of such a personal aspect of life carved so boldly into stone and lead. It's a world away from the whispering pruderies of later centuries, a reminder that the past often held its own brand of honesty and humor about the things that matter most. As you step back from the wall, the cool night air wrapping around you, you carry with you the subtle echoes of Rome's fascination. A culture where the phallus was both weapon and shield, where statues stood as both guardians and jesters, and where magic was summoned not just to protect cities, but to ensure that, in the most private of theaters, performance was never compromised. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the flicker of torchlight dancing across stone faces, the murmur of ancient voices sharing their hopes and boasts in the quiet of the night. And with that, a slow, steady calm settles over you, an intimate glimpse into a world both strange and oddly familiar, whispering its secrets as you drift gently into sleep. You find yourself in a quiet corner of ancient Rome, the evening sun casting long shadows across the marble pillars and dusty streets. The air is thick with the mingled scents of blooming oleander and faint traces of burning incense from nearby temples. As you settle onto a stone bench beneath the soft rustling of olive branches, a gentle breeze carries the faint murmur of voices from the forum, where matters of law and governance quietly unfold. Tonight, you listen closely to a curious, somewhat unsettling tale about Emperor Augustus and his intricate relationship with the laws he so sternly enforced. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, was a man of contradictions. He came into power after decades of civil war, promising peace and stability, a golden age to restore Rome's faded grandeur. Part of his vision involved not just political reform, but also moral reform. You can imagine the weight those reforms bore, like a thick cloak draped solemnly over the city's shoulders. Among these reforms were laws that reached into the most private corners of Roman life, laws about marriage, fidelity, and personal conduct. One of his most notable measures was a series of laws known collectively as the Lex Julii, named after his adoptive family line. These laws were intended to encourage marriage and childbearing among the Roman elite, to stave off what Augustus saw as moral decline. But the part that whispers most quietly through the pages of history is the law on adultery. Augustus made adultery not just a personal failing, but a crime punishable by exile, confiscation of property, and in some cases, banishment to remote islands. The idea was to protect the sanctity of marriage, to restore honor to Roman households, which Augustus believed were the bedrock of Rome's greatness. You imagine the stern officials reading these laws aloud in the Senate, or the crier announcing them in the bustling marketplaces, their voices steady and unyielding. Adultery, they said, was a plague, a poison that could spread like wildfire through the veins of society. Yet, as the candlelight flickers across the marble busts of senators and patricians, you start to notice a shadow that complicates this serene picture. Augustus himself, the very enforcer of these moral codes, did not always adhere to them in his private life. His own relationships were marked by liaisons and lovers, as well as marriages that served political ends more than personal affection. Tacitus and Suetonius, the chroniclers of Roman life who speak in quiet, measured tones, hint at Augustus's numerous affairs, some of which were discreet, others less so. You might wonder how this could be possible, that the man who legislated such strict punishments would walk his own path so differently. But the truth is that in Augustus's Rome, the laws were as much about power and control as they were about morality. The emperor's position elevated him above the common rules, allowing him a latitude not extended to the ordinary citizen. It's a delicate dance between public virtue and private indulgence, a paradox that sits heavy under the marble arches. Imagine, for a moment, yourself in a dimly lit villa on the Palatine Hill, where Augustus might retreat after a day of governing. The flickering glow of oil lamps casts soft shadows on walls adorned with frescoes of mythological scenes. The air is heavy with the scent of myrrh and freshly cut laurel leaves. Here, The emperor's presence is commanding but also human, marked by the same desires and weaknesses that he legislated against. This disparity between law and action, the double standard, was not lost on the Roman people. You can almost hear the whispered conversations in the tabernae, where citizens traded gossip as eagerly as they did olive oil and wine. The emperor slaps hands with morality, they might say, but tucks his own desires beneath his toga. It is a quiet hypocrisy, one that seeps into the fabric of Roman society, teaching a subtle and dangerous lesson. That laws are flexible, bendable, and perhaps most importantly, that they serve those in power first. The danger of such double standards is profound. When leaders proclaim rigid ideals but do not embody them, faith in the law erodes like mortar in ancient walls. The very people who are supposed to keep order begin to question the fairness of the system. You can sense a fragile tension in the air, one that could crack. The carefully maintained facade of Roman virtue at any moment. In the twilight of the Roman Republic's transformation into empire, morality laws like those of Augustus had a dual purpose. On the surface, they sought to elevate personal virtue and restore a sense of communal honor. Beneath the surface, however, they functioned as tools to reinforce the emperor's control, to shape not just politics but the intimate lives of Rome's citizens. And yet, the emperor himself remained somewhat untethered from these strictures, a reminder that power often comes with the privilege of exemption. As you lie back under the vast, star-strewn Roman sky, the distant sounds of the city winding down, you hold this paradox gently in your mind. A man who demands virtue, yet wields it selectively like a finely sharpened blade, sometimes used, sometimes sheathed. It is a whisper of human complexity from a time long past, a lesson wrapped in the soft folds of history's night. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you carry with you the quiet understanding that morality, like all things, is sometimes a shadow play on the walls of power, flickering gently but never quite steady. You step quietly into the warm, sun-dappled courtyards of ancient India, where fragrant incense curls gently through the air like a whisper, and the soft rustling of silk robes mingles with the distant song of flutes. The world here moves with a certain measured grace, as though time itself slows down to honor the rhythms of the body, the heart, and the soul. You find yourself drawn toward a delicate scroll resting upon a bed of saffron-hued petals, its edges browned with the quiet passage of many centuries. This is the Kama Sutra, not merely a manual of carnal pleasure, as some might hastily assume, but a sacred text, a repository of spiritual guidance on the art of living and loving fully. In this ancient sanctuary, intimacy is not rushed, nor is it decadent in the way you might expect. Instead, it's an elegant dance of awareness, an invitation to explore the union of two beings as a profound expression of the cosmos itself. The text invites you to slow your breath, to attune your senses to the subtle energies that flow beneath the surface of skin and bone, weaving the threads of connection with reverence and intention. Imagine light filtering softly through latticed windows, casting latticework shadows like a gentle caress across smooth, polished stone floors. The fragrant scent of jasmine lingers, mingling with the warm earthiness of sandalwood incense, grounding you in this moment. Here, the Kama Sutra's lessons unfold gently, like petals of a lotus opening in the morning sun, revealing not only techniques but a philosophy that honors pleasure as a pathway to harmony and self-understanding. The text describes various postures and embraces, but not to titillate or excite as you might expect. Each position is crafted with a mindful purpose, encouraging both partners to attune to one another's energies, to communicate silently through touch, gaze, and breath. There are instructions on how to lengthen your gaze, letting your eyes linger like soft embers, kindling a flame that rises not from haste but from patient unfolding. The careful placement of fingers and the tender exploration of contours are portrayed as meditations, moments to discover the sacred geography of the beloved's body. You learn that pleasure is not a hurried pursuit, but a ritual, a slow weaving of connection that honors the cycles of nature. The waxing and waning of the moon, the rise and fall of the tides within your own veins. The text gently guides you to explore the art of kissing, not as a mere act of passion, but as a sacred exchange of life force, the gentle pressing of lips like petals touching water's surface, creating ripples that spread outward into harmony. Throughout the Kama Sutra, you sense a deep respect for balance, in the union of masculine and feminine energies, in the interplay of stillness and movement, in the merging of physical sensation with spiritual awareness. It teaches that through this balance, lovers may transcend the ordinary, touching a place beyond the confines of the body, where the self dissolves into unity. The text's language is soft, almost like a whisper, a description of how the fingers may trace delicate patterns across the nape of the neck, or how a gentle breath upon the collarbone can ignite a warmth that spreads slowly, like dawn's first light spilling across the horizon. It speaks of the importance of setting, the ambience of a room lit by the flicker of oil lamps, where shadows dance slowly on walls carved with tales of gods and lovers from a time that feels both distant and intimately familiar. You imagine the scent of rose and cardamom lingering in the air, mixing with the faint sound of water flowing from a nearby fountain, its gentle murmur a continuous, soothing presence. In this space, the lessons of the Kama Sutra breathe with a quiet dignity, reminding you that pleasure is as much about the soul's yearning as the body's response. It is not a manual for indulgence, nor a secret guide to lust, but a tender invitation to approach intimacy with mindfulness, ceremony, and love. The Kama Sutra offers a map, not simply of physical positions, but of emotional landscapes and spiritual possibilities. It is an ancient song, sung softly over the centuries, urging you to listen closely, to embrace the sacred dance of connection with reverence and calm. As you settle deeper into this ancient world, the edges of time blur, and you find yourself cradled by the calm wisdom of a text that transcends its pages, whispering of unity, respect, and the quiet power of love gently unfolding in the stillness between two hearts. You step softly onto the cool, worn stone path that winds through the ancient temple grounds, your footsteps almost swallowed by the whispering echoes of the past. The air is thick with the faint scent of sandalwood incense, curling lazily upward, mingling with a subtle dampness that hints at the temple's age and the monsoon rains long past. Around you, massive stone walls rise like silent sentinels, decorated with carvings that pulse with a quiet, almost secret life. As you move deeper into the temple's heart, your fingers brush lightly against the rough, textured surfaces of the pillars. Each one is a tapestry of intertwined figures, frozen in an eternal embrace, their forms carved with such tenderness and precision that you can almost feel the warmth of their touch. The stone is cool beneath your palm, yet the images are imbued with a vitality that seems to hum beneath the surface, as if the temple itself is breathing softly in the gentle shadows. Your eyes trace the delicate curves and lines of the sculpted lovers, gods and goddesses entwined in moments of divine union. These are not mere depictions of physical closeness, but celebrations of cosmic harmony, a sacred dance where pleasure becomes a pathway to transcendence. The figures are adorned with intricate jewelry and flowing garments, their expressions serene and blissful, inviting you to witness a world where pleasure and spirituality are inseparable, where every touch is a prayer whispered in the language of stone. From somewhere deeper within the temple, a soft vibration begins to reach your ears, a low, rhythmic chant, carried on a breath of air that threads through the corridors like a secret. The voices are steady, a gentle murmur that seems to ripple through the carved stone, weaving around the figures as if awakening them from their endless stillness. The chant is ancient and sacred, a hymn to love's divine mystery, and you find yourself drawn further along the path, the sound a soft beacon guiding you through the temple's labyrinth. The walls here tell stories not only of unions between gods, but also between the mortal and the divine, between flesh and spirit. You see scenes where lovers' eyes meet in tender understanding, their hands tracing the contours of each other's souls as much as their bodies. The carvings invite you to slow your breath, to let the warm glow of the temple lanterns bathe you in a golden light that softens the edges of the stone and your thoughts alike. You pause beneath an ornate archway, where two figures are locked in an embrace so natural it almost seems as if the stone might pulse with the rhythm of their hearts. The folds of their hair cascade like waterfalls, the jewelry they wear jingles softly in your imagination, and you can almost hear the breath shared between them. This temple does not shy away from the tenderness and intensity of love. Instead, it honors it with a reverence that is both intimate and expansive. The chant swells gently, accompanied now by the subtle rustle of silk robes and the faint scent of jasmine. Shadows flicker across the carvings, cast by the slow dance of a flickering oil lamp somewhere just out of sight. You feel the cool touch of the stone beneath your knees as you sit quietly, letting the sacred atmosphere wash over you like a gentle tide. Here, in this space carved by hands long gone, the boundaries between the earthly and the eternal seem to dissolve. You imagine the artisans who shaped this temple, their own quiet moments of inspiration and devotion, their hands bringing life to stone in acts of creation that were also acts of meditation. Each curve, each line, was a deliberate whisper, a secret shared between creator and creation, a soft celebration of the divine pleasure that courses through the universe. And as the chants continue, low and steady, the temple becomes less like a place and more like a living story, a slow, unfolding poem of touch and breath, light and shadow. You lie back gently against the cool stone floor, eyes tracing the carved heavens above, the figures still smiling down in endless, silent conversation. The scent of incense deepens, wrapping around you like a shawl, and you feel yourself drifting, cradled in a timeless embrace that is both ancient and endlessly new. You lean back gently against the soft silk of your chair, feeling the faint scent of jasmine incense curling lazily through the warm air. The chamber around you is dim, lit only by the flicker of a single oil lamp, its golden glow casting long shadows that dance slowly along the carved wooden panels. You imagine yourself stepping into an ancient palace deep within imperial China, where every breath, every glance, and every whispered word is part of a carefully woven tapestry of power. In this delicate world, power is not loud or brash. It is a quiet performance, a subtle dance played out in the hushed corridors and blossom-filled courtyards of the Forbidden City. Here, emperors reign not just with grand proclamations, but with an intricate choreography of control, a mastery over bodies and silences that few outside the palace walls could ever fully understand. You imagine the eunuchs first, those curious figures who move like shadows through the palace, neither men nor women in the usual sense, but something altogether more complicated. Their bodies have been altered, deliberately changed to remove certain natural desires and distractions, so they may serve the emperor without question. This physical transformation is not merely a medical procedure, but a symbol of the empire's power, the ability to shape even the very flesh of its servants. These eunuchs are everywhere, in the imperial kitchens where the scent of rich broth simmers, in the vast libraries where scrolls of silk and bamboo are carefully unrolled, and in the inner chambers where the emperor's private world unfolds. They are trusted confidants and messengers, their presence a constant, quiet reminder that the emperor's gaze extends far beyond the throne. The eunuch's silence is as important as their bodies. They do not speak unnecessarily, for their power lies in discretion and the ability to move unseen and unheard. You can almost hear the soft rustle of their robes as they glide through the corridors, their footsteps muffled against the cold stone floors. Their very existence is a testament to control. Control over one's own body, control over speech, and ultimately, control over the flow of information within the palace walls. And then there are the concubines, delicate figures draped in silks of softest pastel hues, their presence both a pleasure and a political instrument. These women dwell in the inner court, the heart of the emperor's world, where every gesture is laden with meaning and every smile is carefully measured. Their lives are an intricate game of subtle signals, where favor and influence are whispered between silk folds and the fluttering of painted fans. You breathe in the faint scent of osmanthus and sandalwood that hangs in the air here, mingling with the perfume of lotus blossoms tucked behind the concubine's ears. Their beauty is not only physical, but a form of power itself, an offering to the emperor's desire, yes, but also a carefully maintained tool in a palace where seduction and suspicion are inseparable. The emperor watches from his throne, his expression calm and unreadable. His gaze is steady but silent, a quiet force that commands without shouting. Power in this space is less about force and more about the artful withholding of it, the measured pause, the deliberate silence, the control of what is said, and more importantly, what is not. You feel the weight of this silence settle around you, like a soft velvet curtain draping over the room, muffling the world outside. It is a silence filled with tension and promise, where every glance from the emperor can shift fortunes and every quiet moment can conceal a storm. The concubines, aware of this, move with a grace that mirrors the slow-flowing calligraphy on ancient scrolls. Each step and gesture a subtle message, an invitation, or a warning whispered in the language of silk and shadow. Their power lies in this dance, in the understanding that to be seen is both a privilege and a trap. To capture the emperor's attention is to momentarily hold a piece of the immense power he wields, yet it is also to risk falling into an abyss of jealousy and intrigue. In this delicate balance, the emperor's body is both a throne and a fortress, a space where control is maintained through the silence of his own will. He is surrounded by voices, but his own words are few, carefully chosen and weighted with meaning. Each command is a soft ripple in the otherwise still pond of the court, setting into motion subtle shifts in power that no one outside the palace fully perceives. You imagine the flicker of candlelight illuminating the emperor's face as he remains motionless, his eyes tracing the slow movements of a concubine approaching, her feet barely making a sound on the polished stone floor. Their interaction is a quiet negotiation, an exchange as old as the empire itself, where desire, loyalty, and authority intertwine without need for loud declarations. The eunuchs, concubines, and emperor exist within this carefully choreographed world, where bodies are not merely physical forms but symbols and instruments of power. The palace breathes with their presence, a living organism pulsing with silent commands and soft gestures, a realm where the loudest voice is often the one left unspoken. As you close your eyes, the scent of incense lingers, the soft rustle of silk fades into the stillness, and you drift slowly, gently, into a world where power is a delicate and whispered secret, held in the quiet spaces between speech and silence. As you settle deeper into this quiet moment, imagine the weight and texture of life in those times. A world where the very fabric of your future, your standing, and even your soul seemed woven through the hidden chambers of your sexuality. The bedroom, that most intimate and personal space you might think of today as a refuge, was hardly so private. Instead, it was a delicate stage upon which the drama of reputation, karma, and lineage quietly, but relentlessly, played out. Picture the flickering glow of candlelight casting long shadows across the stone walls. A faint scent of incense lingers in the air, a thin veil that tries to soften the raw reality. Behind the closed doors, the choices made in whispered moments were not merely private indulgences or fleeting passions. They were acts charged with invisible consequences that stretched far beyond the individual. Here, sexuality was never simply about pleasure or desire. It was a carefully calibrated tool, a currency traded in the subtle economy of honor and legacy. You might imagine the cautious, almost ritualistic nature of these encounters, a gentle touch laden with the weight of expectation, a glance heavy with unspoken meanings. In this world, every caress bore the potential to affect not just the immediate participants, but entire families, entire futures. The threads of karma bound a person to their actions in ways both spiritual and social. Every act was a step along a path, a ripple in a pond, carrying the potential to elevate or tarnish the souls standing in this life and the next. This was not casual. The stakes were high. Maintaining a good reputation could mean alliances between powerful families, solidifying social status, securing political favor, or protecting one's children from ruin. Conversely, a misstep, a whisper of scandal, an unguarded moment could unravel years of careful standing, casting long shadows over a person's name and those who would come after them. You feel the cold pressure of those expectations, like the chill of a stone floor beneath your feet, persistent and unyielding. And yet, these moments were not locked away in secrecy. The bedrooms were watched, their occupants observed through networks of gossip and social scrutiny, as if the walls themselves had ears. Neighbors, servants, relatives, all played a part in this quiet surveillance. The line between private and public blurred as the intimate became a thread woven into the communal tapestry. A whispered rumor could spread like incense smoke, invisible yet pervasive, altering the way others saw you, and by extension, how your family was seen. Lineage was another quiet force pressing upon these moments. The desire for heirs, for continuation of one's bloodline, imbued every encounter with a solemn gravity. Each child born was a living testament, a symbol of the family's survival and prosperity. The pressure to produce legitimate heirs was immense, and the consequences of failure could be devastating. You can almost hear the soft rustle of velvet dresses, the creak of wooden bed frames as this silent urgency permeated the chambers where lives and histories were quietly shaped. Sexuality, then, was not merely a private act but a powerful language, one speaking of power, duty, and destiny. It was a delicate dance choreographed by society's invisible hand, where every move could reinforce or undermine a person's place within the grand narrative of their world. You feel the weight of that dance, the quiet tension between desire and duty, freedom and constraint, whispered beneath the hush of candlelight and the watchful eyes beyond the door. So, as you lie here now, perhaps tracing the soft patterns in the shadows, remember that those seemingly simple moments in the bedroom held the complex threads of karma, reputation, and lineage. They were the unseen currents shaping lives, the quiet forces steering futures, all under the watchful gaze of a world that never truly turned away. The bedroom was no sanctuary. It was a crucible, a stage, a testament to the high stakes of being human, vulnerable, and forever bound by the choices made in those hushed, shadowed spaces. You find yourself stepping quietly through the worn and dust-moted corridors of ancient Babylon, the warm evening light fading just beyond the thick, sun-baked mud walls. The air carries a faint scent of crushed cedar and smoldering incense, mingling with the dry, comforting earthiness of the clay beneath your fingers as you trail your hand along a carved stone tablet resting gently on a wooden stand. The tablet is heavy, its surface etched with rows upon rows of wedge-shaped cuneiform characters, each a whisper of a world millennia removed. This is the Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest law codes known to us, dating back to around 1754 BCE. Imagine standing here, in a quiet chamber illuminated by flickering oil lamps, watching ink-dark shadows dance across the rough walls, as you begin to read the declarations, the laws that governed life, love, and transgression in ancient Mesopotamia. The laws speak in a language of sharp contrasts. They are at once meticulous and brutal, measured yet capricious. You notice, in particular, the sections dealing with sex crimes, those violations that struck at the delicate fabric of family, honor, and social order. These laws are not only about punishment, but also about instilling a deep-seated sense of fear and respect among the people. Take, for example, the law that addresses adultery. If a woman was caught sleeping with another man, an offense not merely personal but one that threatened her husband's lineage and property rights, the consequences could be dire. The law decreed that such a woman might be cast into the river, drowning her beneath the cold, unyielding waves as a spectacle that would ripple through the community. The law did not hesitate or equivocate. It was swift and merciless. Yet, as your eyes trace the lines further, you realize that the punishment's severity often depended on who was involved. The laws distinguished between the free and the enslaved, men and women, nobles and commoners. A nobleman's illicit acts might be met with fines or exile, while a slave could be subjected to physical mutilation or death. Here, you see an uneven scale of justice, more about maintaining the social hierarchy than an absolute sense of fairness. You run your finger gently along the carved characters, describing the punishment for a man who falsely accuses another man of sexual misconduct. The claimant could be drowned in the same river that claimed adulterous women, a grim symmetry that emphasizes the fear of false accusations as much as the fear of the crimes themselves. Justice in Hammurabi's time was a complex dance between retribution and deterrence, designed not only to punish but to warn. As you lie back against a carved stone bench, the cool surface grounding you in this ancient reality, you feel the weight of a society gripped by fear. Fear of social disorder, of bloodlines corrupted, of God's wrath invoked by human sin. The laws are etched in stone, but they breathe the anxiety and unease of a people striving to hold their fragile world together. The brutality of these punishments, while harsh by today's standards, served a purpose beyond mere cruelty. They were warnings in the flickering lamplight, public reminders etched in stone, and repeated in hushed whispers from one generation to the next. They were meant to keep the shadows at bay, to prevent the chaos that might erupt if the sacred boundaries of family and property were ignored. Yet beneath the severity, you catch glimpses of inconsistency and contradiction. The law is not a monolith but a patchwork, tailored to social status and circumstance. Sometimes justice falters, swayed by power and prejudice. Sometimes fear overrides fairness. The very existence of these laws suggests a society seeking order in a world where human desires and fears tangled inextricably, leaving room for both justice and injustice to flourish side by side. As you close your eyes, the murmurs of Mesopotamia drift softly to you. The whispered names of accused and accuser, the rushing river swallowing secrets, the crackle of fire beside the tablets stand. And somewhere deep in the night, you sense the ever-present tension between the law's stern authority and the unpredictable currents of human life. Here, in the stillness, justice is at once a shield and a sword, a fragile construct, balanced delicately on the edge of fear. The night wraps around you like a thick velvet cloak, soft and dark, muffling the outside world until only the faintest rustle of leaves and the distant sigh of a night bird reach your ears. You push open a creaking wooden door, careful not to disturb the stillness, and step into a small chamber dimly lit by the flicker of a single candle. The flame dances gently, casting warm golden shadows that sway across the rough stone walls and the heavy wooden beams above. The air is thick with the scent of smoldering herbs, something earthy, with a hint of sweetness and spice, curling into your nostrils and settling deep in your chest, loosening the edges of your thoughts. In the center of the room, a figure is seated cross-legged on a worn woven mat, their eyes closed in serene concentration. Their voice is a low, steady murmur, barely above a whisper, yet it threads through the silence like a delicate thread of silk. You catch fragments of words in a forgotten tongue, old incantations meant to coax love from the shadows, to awaken desire in a heart that might otherwise lie cold and untouched. This place is a sanctuary for secrets, for the whispered arts that have survived in the folds of history, arts that are neither fully embraced by the daylight nor entirely banished to the dark. Here in this quiet room, the ancient magic of love and longing lingers, woven through powders, rituals, and the gentle hands of midwives who doubled as guardians of this sacred knowledge. You notice the small clay bowls arranged carefully before the figure, each containing finely ground powders in muted hues, soft pinks like crushed rose petals, deep reds reminiscent of dried berries, and pale whites that shine faintly in the candlelight. These powders are more than mere pigments. They are the alchemy of affection, crafted from roots and blossoms gathered under moonlight, from the powdered bones of forgotten herbs and the secret essences distilled in tiny glass vials. The figure dips a slender finger into one of the bowls, lifting a pinch of the powder and letting it fall like a gentle snowfall onto a piece of parchment. The parchment, rough and fibrous, bears an intricate drawing of intertwined hearts, encircled by runes whose meanings have faded from common memory, but still hum with power. The powder settles into the ink, blending and blurring the lines between image and substance, binding the spell in both art and essence. You can almost imagine the hands that prepared these powders, calloused yet careful, the fingers stained faintly with the blood-red dust of crushed petals. Perhaps midwives who, in addition to guiding new life into the world, guarded the threshold of desire, weaving spells to protect the bonds of love or to ignite them anew. These women and men moved between roles with a grace that feels almost otherworldly. Their knowledge whispered from mother to daughter, from one trusted apprentice to the next, beneath the veil of night when the world was asleep and magic felt closest. The chanting continues, a rhythm both hypnotic and gentle, like the steady beating of a heart. You feel your breath slow, matching the cadence, each syllable wrapping around you like a warm shawl. The words speak of capturing a heart, of weaving invisible threads between souls, binding them through longing and shared dreams. They speak of powders sprinkled on pillows to invite sweet dreams of the beloved, of oils anointed on wrists and temples to kindle the fires of attraction, of sacred dances performed under the silver gaze of the moon to stir desire from its slumber. Near the figure, you see a small bundle of dried herbs tied with a crimson ribbon, lavender for calm, rose petals for love, and something darker, more pungent, perhaps myrrh or sandalwood, meant to deepen the mystery. The scent rises as the figure gently crushes the bundle, releasing a smoky perfume that seems to mingle with the whisper of the chant. It's an aroma that feels at once comforting and unsettling, a reminder that love is as intricate as it is elusive. You notice a tiny glass vial, filled with a deep red liquid that glimmers in the candlelight like captured sunset. This is no ordinary potion, but a love elixir, brewed with painstaking patience, steeped in secret ingredients gathered over many nights. It is said these elixirs can stir the heart's deepest yearnings, coaxing a lover's gaze to linger, a smile to brighten, a hand to reach out in tenderness. As the figure's voice wavers slightly, the final words of the chant drift into the quiet. They slowly open their eyes, revealing a calmness that speaks of timeless knowledge, a calmness born of knowing both the power and the delicate fragility of love's unseen threads. They dip a finger into the red liquid and trace a small sign on the air, as if sketching an invisible seal into the night itself. You feel, in this tender space, the weight of countless nights like this one, nights spent weaving spells not for conquest or control, but for connection, for the fragile hope of shared affection. The midwives, the wise ones, the keepers of this archaic lore, they offered more than just rituals. They offered a chance to touch the sacred, to turn the intangible whispers of the heart into something felt, something real. You step back slowly, the candlelight warming your face one last time before you slip through the door and back into the quiet night, carrying with you the softened echoes of a love spell whispered in the shadows. You find yourself stepping softly through a quiet garden just as twilight settles in, a gentle velvet dusk wrapping everything in a muted blue haze. The scent of damp earth and crushed herbs curls in the cool air, whispering secrets you're not quite meant to hear. Somewhere nearby, A faint murmur of voices drifts, soft and distant, like fragile waves lapping against stone. You follow that sound, drawn gently toward a small stone bench nestled beneath the heavy boughs of a cypress tree, where two figures sit, shadows leaning toward one another, their presence suspended in a fragile moment. The first is a soldier, his posture weary, but proud in a way only someone who has seen far too much can carry. You notice the roughness of his hands, calloused from wielding a sword he'd rather not have drawn again. His tunic, faded and worn along the seams, whispers of countless marches and sleepless nights under open skies. There is something unyielding in his gaze, something hardened by duty, but softened now in this quiet company. He is a man who has lived on the edge of survival, yet here, in this tender half-light, he seems almost fragile. Not the armor and orders, but a man yearning for something forbidden. Beside him sits a woman cloaked in the delicate silks of wealth and privilege. Her hands rest lightly on her lap, fingers intertwined as if holding onto a fragile thread. Her skin glows softly, like alabaster touched by candlelight, smooth and untouched by hardship. You can almost smell the faint trace of rosewater in the air around her, mingling with the earthy scent of the garden. She is a world apart from the soldier, born into velvet and marble halls, her days measured by gold and quiet expectations rather than battle cries or whispered orders. Yet here they are, drawn together by an invisible force, the cruel magnetism of a love doomed from the start. You watch as the soldier's hand edges closer, trembling just slightly before settling on hers, a touch light enough to frighten, yet brave enough to promise. Their eyes meet, his harboring storms of regret, hers shimmering with a desperate hope she knows cannot last. Between them, the chasm of station and fate yawns wide, a silent abyss filled with unspoken words and impossible dreams. You can almost hear the slow cadence of their whispering, soft as moth wings against ancient parchment. Stories exchanged under the cloak of night when the world outside is merciless and unyielding. She speaks in hushed tones about gardens she has never been allowed to wander, while he recounts the distant lands he has marched through, places neither could ever truly know together. Their voices, low and trembling, blend with the rustle of leaves above, weaving a tapestry of longing embroidered with shadows. The soldier is a slave once, though no chain wraps his wrists now. The invisible bonds of servitude cling deep within his soul. He was born into the dust and toil beneath the sun, raised to obey and endure without question. His every breath was once measured by the will of those who owned him, an existence half-lived, hanging in the balance between survival and erasure. Yet fate had set him upon a path that led to a sword instead of shackles, a uniform instead of rags. Even so, the scars of past servitude cling, stubbornly to his heart, ghostly reminders that no uniform can fully erase. The woman, daughter of wealth and title, had been wrapped in silks and spoken to in polite tones since birth. Her world was one of quiet balls and whispered intrigues, of letters sealed with wax and portraits painted in oils. But beneath the surface, the gilded cage felt heavier than any chain. She longed for a life that defied expectation, a life where her heart could breathe freely, away from the cold eyes and cold courtesies of her class. And in this soldier, rough-hewn and honest, she glimpsed a world far beyond the marble pillars and velvet drapes. But the world outside this garden is not so forgiving. You sense the weight pressing down upon them, the unforgiving laws of caste and class, the harsh judgment lurking in every glance beyond the cypress boughs. Love for them is a dangerous rebellion, a whispered sin beneath the watchful eyes of society. Should their secret be revealed, ruin would come swift and merciless, exile, imprisonment, or worse. The soldier would be dragged back into chains, not the physical kind perhaps, but shackles of disgrace and broken dreams. The woman would be forced into alliances of convenience, marriages sealed with contracts rather than with hearts. Their love is a fragile flame flickering under a stormy sky, beautiful, warm, but destined to be snuffed out. You lean closer, as though to hear the softest confession, and catch a glimpse of tears forming in her eyes, silent, shimmering pearls pressed against lashes that dare not fully close. He brushes a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a gesture soaked in tenderness and sorrow. They know the truth as well as you do. Some loves are not meant to last. Not in this life, not under these stars. But in this moment, this suspended heartbeat of time, they exist beyond those cruel boundaries. Here, the garden is their sanctuary, the moon their silent guardian. And you, even as a stranger passing through, are invited to witness a love both exquisite and heartbreaking, a quiet testament to the human spirit's stubborn refusal to surrender to the cold dictates of fate. As night deepens, the whispers fade and the shadows grow longer. You imagine them rising together, hands still clasped tightly, stepping carefully back into the world that will never understand. You watch their figures disappear into the darkness, carrying with them the secret of a love that dared to bloom where it was never meant to. And as you lie down to rest, the scent of crushed herbs and rosewater lingers still, a gentle reminder that even in the most unlikely places, love finds a way to breathe, fragile and fleeting, beneath the quiet stars. As you lie back and let your eyes drift softly closed, imagine the dim flicker of a single candle casting long shadows against rough stone walls. The air carries a faint, earthy scent, something like damp moss mixed with the whisper of ancient incense. Somewhere nearby, the faint rustle of parchment, fragile and yellowed with age, seems almost alive beneath gentle fingertips. This is where stories live, where they cling to the edges of memory, even when the voices that once told them have long since fallen silent. You can almost see those stories, etched quietly into the fabric of forgotten places. In dark caves, sheltered from the harshness of time, someone long ago pressed a stick or a finger against cool rock, tracing the outlines of creatures and symbols, a silent diary scratched into stone. These marks are not grand or polished, but deeply human, imperfect, urgent, and tender in their survival. You can imagine the person who made them, perhaps a child or a weary traveler, pausing in the gloom to leave a trace that might one day speak across centuries. These primitive inscriptions are like whispers from a half-forgotten dream. They don't shout their meanings. Instead, they beckon quietly, inviting you to lean closer, to listen carefully to the unspoken stories folded within their lines. Shadows dance around them as the candle flickers, and you almost hear the breath of the one who made them, their hopes, fears, or maybe just a restless night that needed marking. It's a kind of fragile immortality, a way to say, I was here, I thought, I felt, I needed you to know. Elsewhere, scrolls lie buried beneath layers of soil and dust, hidden away in the cool silence of tombs or tucked into the folds of forgotten libraries. These scrolls are made of delicate materials, papyrus, vellum, or thin sheets of bark, that have survived against all odds. They are fragile as butterfly wings, yet within their fragile fibers, entire worlds unfold. Imagine the slow, careful hand that inked each letter, the steady brushstrokes that formed characters now blurred but still legible. When you imagine unrolling such a scroll, the faintest crackle of age-old material fills the space. The scent of old ink, dry parchment, and a touch of dust rises gently. As the writing reveals itself, you find yourself transported to distant courts and quiet chambers, to marketplaces bustling with soft murmurs or serene temples where the air is thick with the aroma of burning myrrh. These scrolls contain stories not just of kings and gods, but of ordinary lives, love letters, recipes, prayers, and laments, all preserved like fragile petals pressed between pages of time. Yet, even when the physical texts have crumbled or vanished, stories have a way of surviving in the living breath of myth and memory. Myths are like whispers passed from one person to another, softly spoken in the glow of fires that flicker against the night. They are not static tales, but living, shifting things, sometimes distorted, sometimes erotic or eerie, but always carrying a kernel of truth folded inside their layers. Listen closely, and you can hear the echo of ancient stories in the names of rivers and mountains, in the patterns of stars above, or in the quiet rituals that repeat themselves through generations. You might find a hint of a long-lost tale woven into a lullaby sung by a grandmother, or glimpsed in the careful embroidery of a dress, where symbols hold stories too sacred or fragile to be spoken aloud. These are narratives carved not into stone or parchment, but into the very fabric of culture and the human heart. What makes these surviving stories so haunting is their perfect impermanence. They are not polished monuments, but rather fragile fragments, scratches and whispers, shadows and hints that invite you to imagine the rest. This incompleteness gives them a strange, aching beauty, a reminder that history is not just the grand and the monumental, but the quiet, intimate, and often broken stories that connect us across time. And so, as you settle deeper into the warmth and stillness, the stories that have survived, etched into walls, buried in scrolls, gently hummed in myths, become more than just tales from the past. They are echoes of real people, with real fears and dreams, reaching out to you across the centuries in the softest of voices. They remind you that even in silence, even in forgetting, the human story continues to unfold, fragile, haunting, and unforgettable. The fire has faded now, its last embers glowing faintly in the quiet ash. You sit beside this dying hearth, the warmth retreating gently into the cool embrace of evening. Shadows stretch long and soft, folding themselves around you like an old, familiar blanket. The scent of smoldering wood lingers faintly in the air, mingling with the delicate sweetness of smoke that clings to your hair, to your skin. It's a quiet moment, one of those rare pauses when the world feels slow enough to breathe, deep and unhurried. You lean back, feeling the rough stone beneath you, cool now in the absence of flame. Outside, the night has deepened, and beyond the faint glow of the hearth you can almost imagine the vastness of the dark, endless and patient. It is in this space, wrapped in the stillness, that you find yourself reflecting on something strange and beautiful. Desire, how it, unlike the mighty empires that once rose and crumbled, seems to linger quietly, almost defiantly, long after the dust has settled. Empires, after all, are loud and brilliant things. They blaze across the centuries like fireworks, intense and spectacular, but fleeting. Their banners, once bright and proud, fray and fade. Their towers crumble into rubble, their roads swallowed by grass and time. The names of rulers, carved into stone and whispered in legends, grow distant, sometimes indecipherable, like echoes in a vast empty hall. And yet, beneath the grandeur and the decay, beneath the weight of conquest and loss, desire hums softly on. You realize this as you watch the dying fire, its glow no longer commanding or fierce, but tender, almost intimate. Desire is that subtle ember, the pulse beneath all the grand stories of kingdoms and kings. It is the quiet yearning that moves people, king and peasant alike, to reach out beyond themselves, to dream, to create, and to connect. Even when the mighty walls have fallen and the armies have marched away, desire remains. It is the thread that stitches together the scattered fragments of a broken world. Imagine, then, the great empires of old, the Roman, the Persian, the Maya. Each one was born from human longing, desire for power, for security, for meaning. Yet their greatest legacy is not the stone monuments or the vast networks of roads, but the desires they embodied, passed on in stories, in art, in whispered memories shared by flickering candlelight. You breathe in the night air, cool and still, scented faintly with earth and distant leaves. In the quiet, you can almost hear the soft murmurs of those long-gone voices, voices that spoke of love, of ambition, of homes left and found, of children hoped for in uncertain times. These are the true traces left behind. The fire of an empire may have faded, but the flicker of human desire quietly endures, like a gentle pulse beneath the world's endless night. You reach out, tracing a finger along the rough stone beside you, feeling its solidity and age. Just as the stone holds the weight of centuries, desire holds the weight of our shared humanity, uneasy, complicated, endlessly persistent. It is this desire that has outlived empires, that has kept stories alive, that still kindles the quiet hopes of those who wander through history, searching for meaning in the shadows. So as the last glimmers of flame disappear and the room settles into soft darkness, you lie back and let yourself drift on this thought. The fire may be gone, but the ember of desire still glows within us all, soft, steady, unyielding, waiting to be seen, to be felt, to be understood. And with that, you close your eyes, carried gently into the calm night, cradled by the memory of what once was and the quiet, ever-persistent longing for what might still be. You find yourself settling deeper into the soft embrace of your chair, the room around you dim and quiet, the faint flicker of candlelight casting gentle shadows that dance lazily on the walls. The scent of worn parchment and a whisper of sandalwood incense hangs delicately in the air, mingling with the cool night's breath slipping in through a slightly open window. It's a moment to pause, to breathe, and to imagine, for a brief while, that the ancient heartbeat of humanity still pulses within you. Even now, in these modern times where you might be wearing a soft cotton shirt, or a cozy sweater, or perhaps the smooth fabric of a button-down shirt, those clothes are only a thin veil draped over something much older. You could be sitting anywhere, on a sleek sofa, in a bustling cafe, or your own familiar bed. But beneath these layers of comfort and convenience lies the same flickering ember of primal impulse that has guided humans for tens of thousands of years. You might feel a strange kind of kinship with the distant figures who once gathered around campfires, the flickering flames casting their faces in warm orange, light as shadows stretched and recoiled over rough stone and scorched earth. These people, your ancestors, were not so different from you. Their hands, roughened by the hunt or the delicate crafting of tools, reached out to grasp the unknown in the same way you do now, curious, cautious, and full of quiet wonder. Their worlds were simpler in some ways, wrapped in the rhythm of the seasons and the measured beat of day and night. But in others, they were alive with complexity. the intricate dance of survival, community, and meaning. When you breathe in deeply, you might almost catch the faintest echo of their stories in your own thoughts. The urgency of firelight, the soothing crackle of wood ash, the touch of stone smooth from millennia of handling. Even as you sit here, wrapped in blankets and softly glowing screens, the core of those ancient impulses whispers beneath your skin. The desire to connect, to belong, to protect, and to create. These are not inventions of modern times. They are the very marrow of your being, passed down through generations, whispered in the quiet moments just like this. Imagine the subtle similarities between your life and theirs. When you seek comfort in a familiar scent, perhaps it is not so different from their reliance on the smell of burning pine resin or sweet grasses to ward off insects or spirits. When you trace your fingers over the pages of a book, your touch echoes theirs as they traced symbols etched into bone, bark, or stone. An early attempt to capture thought and memory, to hold onto meaning beyond the fleeting moment. And when you lie down at night, closing your eyes under thick blankets or a soft pillow, you join a long line of sleepers who have sought rest under the vast, unchanging sky. Your dreams, those secret wanderings of the mind, are a shared human currency, shaped by fears and hopes that stretch back through the flickering torchlight of countless nights. You might smile softly, thinking of how the clothes you wear differ vastly from the animal skins and woven grasses of your predecessors. Yet, in this difference, there is also continuity. Clothing, after all, is just another way humans have adapted to their world. An expression not just of protection from cold or sun, but of identity, status, and belonging. You might not hunt with spears anymore, but the urge to signal who you are, to mark yourself as part of a tribe or community, remains. The buttons on your shirt, the seams in your jacket, the colors you choose, all quietly echo ancient customs of adornment and distinction. Even technology, that hallmark of our current age, is rooted in those ancient impulses. The desire to manipulate your environment, to create tools to make life easier, safer, more meaningful, has not changed. It simply takes new forms: your smartphone, a modern-day equivalent of the stone axe, or bone needle. Each innovation is a thread woven into the continuing tapestry of human ingenuity. And as you listen to this soft story, perhaps you feel the steady thrum of connection wrap around you like a gentle blanket. The past is not some distant, unreachable place. It flows through you, a quiet river beneath the surface of your everyday life. In this way, you are never truly alone. You carry the footsteps of those who walked before you, their whispers mingling with your own. In this shared human journey, the ancient and the modern meet, not as opposites, but as companions on the same path. The impulse to seek warmth, to find shelter, to share stories beneath the stars, to nurture and protect. These are the steady heartbeats beneath the changing fashions and shifting technologies. And so, as you settle further into your space, you might close your eyes for a moment and imagine the long chain of hands reaching across time, your hand among them, each one carrying something precious. The spark of life, the thread of memory, the quiet, enduring flame of being human. And with that thought, you drift softly, comfortably into the night, cradled by the timelessness of our shared, whispered history. You lie back gently, the soft rustle of ancient pages lingering in your ears like a secret just told. The room around you seems to sigh, a low, steady exhale of time itself, and suddenly, all the threads you've followed tonight begin to weave together, like a tapestry slowly unfurling beneath your fingertips. There was the sacred love, wasn't there? That quiet devotion, folded into vows whispered beneath flickering candlelight, where every word felt like a delicate promise etched into the very air. You can almost imagine the scent of beeswax and incense curling around those moments. The mingling of warmth and mystery, the touch of silk and stone, the slight tremble in a voice that dared to call something holy. Love in those strange old times wasn't just a feeling stacked between two people. It was a living force, a sacrament, a sacred rite that beckoned the gods themselves to lean in closer. You've seen how it moved in rituals, in offerings left carefully on altars, in the flicker of a flame that held centuries of yearning. And yet, just beside that tender light, you felt the cold shadow of brutal punishment. It's a whisper darker, a shadow sharper, the sound of iron biting into wood, the hollow echo of gavel strikes, the cold clasp of shackles. The world you've wandered through tonight didn't flinch from cruelty. It carried it with quiet acceptance, as if it were another force of nature, just as inevitable as the changing seasons or the ebb of the tide. The punishments were harsh, whispered to enforce order, to remind people of their place, to wield fear like an invisible hand, slight and yet heavy. The smell of damp stone cells, the rough scratch of chains against cold flesh, the ache of solitude in a darkened room. You can feel it all wrapping itself around the stories you've heard, an ever-present reminder that mercy was sometimes a distant hope. And then, threaded through both the sacred and the severe, there were those strange rituals, the kind that make you pause, heart steady and breath slow, because they belong to a world so utterly different from your own. You've learned about rites performed at twilight, when shadows stretch long and the air grows thick with the scent of cedar and ash. The rustle of leaves under bare feet, the murmured chants that curl like smoke, the careful arrangement of symbols on parchment or carved into stone. These rituals felt like the very heartbeat of the earth, a language older than words themselves. They danced between the divine and the profane, between hope and fear, between life and death, always whispering secrets in a tongue just beyond your full grasp. All these elements, sacred love, brutal punishment, strange rituals, they are threads in the same tapestry, woven tight and worn smooth by countless hands over countless years. They hum softly in the spaces between history and myth, truth and legend, light and shadow. You can feel their echoes in the silence around you now, as if the past itself leans in close, breathing gently on your neck, telling you that it's never really gone. It just waits patiently in the quiet corners, the fading candlelight, the scent of old parchment and cold stone. And maybe that is the most curious thing of all. How strange, how tender, how terrible, how utterly human this history is. Still whispering, still breathing, still alive in the softest of moments when you close your eyes and listen. Now, as you settle deeper into the soft embrace of your pillow, feel the gentle quieting of the world around you. The flicker of candlelight dwindles to a slow, steady glow, and the whispering shadows lengthen and stretch, folding themselves like delicate parchment into the corners of your room. You let the steady rhythm of your breath become slower, a peaceful tide pulling you gently away from the stories that wove through the centuries just moments ago. Imagine yourself lying beneath a vast, ancient sky, stretched out on cool, soft grass dusted with the faint scent of earth and distant rain. Above, the stars pulse quietly, timeless and unhurried, like watchful eyes that have seen the rise and fall of empires, and the soft murmur of forgotten voices carried by the wind. Let these stars, these silent witnesses, cradle you softly as the night whispers lullabies of ages long past. The voices of history, once vivid and close, now begin to soften and fade, like a distant chant lulling you into calm. The echoes of stone halls and parchment scrolls, the crackling of fires in shadowed chambers, the faint murmur of ancient tongues, all gently dissolve into a serene hush. There is no need to chase them now. They have told their tales, and they too must rest, folded away in the quiet folds of time. Feel the slow, steady beat of your heart, a quiet drum in the vastness of night. It is both your own and something shared, a living thread connecting you across centuries to those who dreamed under the same sky, who rested in the same peace. Your breath deepens, a soft ocean of calm washing over you, carrying away the weight of waking hours, the edges of the day melting into a gentle twilight. Allow yourself to sink fully into this peaceful stillness, a place where the past and present gently merge and blur. Here there is nothing to do but rest. No scrolls to read, no voices to hear. Just the slow turning of time, the soft settling of dust on ancient stones, and the quiet heartbeats of those who came before, now at peace. Now rest. Let your eyelids drift closed like the closing of a heavy, old book. Let the ancient voices quiet. Let the past rest. And you, here in this calm, in this moment suspended between worlds, can rest too. Breathe in the cool, soothing air of night. Breathe out all the day's stirrings and awakenings. Sleep now, softly and deeply. The world, both old and new, holds you gently. Tomorrow will wait. For now, the story ends in the silence of the night.